The crystal chandelier shattered against the marble floor, silencing 300 of London's finest. Damian Reavell, the duke they'd buried in scandal 5 years ago, stood at the ballroom entrance like a ghost returned from hell itself. His eyes, cold, dark, burning with purpose, locked onto one man, Edmund Stirling, Earl of Ashford, the architect of his destruction. But then she appeared. Helena, Edmund's sister, the woman Damian had never stopped thinking about, the woman he was about to destroy by proxy. Stay with us until the end to witness the most dramatic confrontation in London's history. Hit that like button and tell us in the comments which city you're watching from. The storm that descended upon London that November evening in 1887 was biblical in its fury. Rain lashed against the tall windows of Ashford House like the fingers of the damned clawing for entry, and thunder rolled across the Thames with such violence that the very foundations of the grand estate seemed to tremble. Inside the ballroom, however, the cream of British society danced and laughed, blissfully insulated from nature's rage by walls of stone, privilege, and willful ignorance. Lady Helena Stirling stood alone at the eastern window, her reflection ghostly in the rain-streaked glass. She was 23 years old and widely regarded as one of the most beautiful women in England. Alabaster skin that had never known labor, hair the color of autumn chestnuts arranged in an elaborate coiffure that had taken her maid 2 hours to perfect, and eyes of such startling gray that poets had written entire sonnets attempting to capture their melancholy depth. Tonight she wore a gown of deep emerald silk that cost more than most families earned in a year, with a bodice so intricately beaded that it caught the candlelight like captured stars. She should have been the belle of the ball. Instead, she felt like a bird in a gilded cage, beautiful and utterly trapped. "Helena, darling, you're being morbid again." The voice belonged to Lady Constance Fairfax, Helena's closest friend, and a woman whose enthusiasm for social events bordered on the religious. Constance appeared at her elbow in a swirl of pink taffeta, champagne glass in hand, her round face flushed with excitement. "I'm not being morbid," Helena replied softly, her gaze still fixed on the storm. "I'm being observant. Look at them, Constance, dancing and drinking while half of London's East End is starving in the streets. Children are dying of cholera in Whitechapel, but here we are, celebrating. What? Our own extraordinary luck at being born into the right families?" Constance's expression shifted from cheerful to concerned. "You've been reading those dreadful reform newspapers again, haven't you? Helena, Edmund would be furious if he knew. A lady of your station shouldn't concern herself with such what? Reality? Human suffering?" Helena's voice remained quiet, but there was steel beneath the velvet. "Tell me, Constance, when did it become inappropriate for a person with means to care about those without?" "It's not that you shouldn't care, darling. It's that you shouldn't let it consume you. You can't save everyone. And frankly, dwelling on such things only makes you sad." Constance touched Helena's arm gently. "Your brother has given you everything. This beautiful home, these gorgeous gowns, your place in society. The least you could do is enjoy it." Helena turned from the window, her gray eyes meeting Constance's with an intensity that made her friend step back slightly. "Edmund has given me a prison, Constance. A very beautiful, very expensive prison, but a prison nonetheless. I'm 23 years old. I've never been allowed to travel without a chaperone. I've never been permitted to pursue my interest in medicine. I've never even been allowed to choose my own friends without his approval. He controls every aspect of my life, and he does it under the guise of protection." "He loves you," Constance protested weakly. "Everything he does is to keep you safe." "No," Helena said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Everything he does is to keep me controlled. There's a difference." Before Constance could respond, the music stopped. Not a natural pause between songs, but an abrupt cessation that sent a ripple of confusion through the crowd. Helena turned back toward the ballroom's entrance, and her breath caught in her throat. The man standing in the doorway was soaked to the bone, his dark hair plastered to his skull, water dripping from his greatcoat to pool on the pristine marble floor. He should have looked ridiculous, a drowned rat crashed among peacocks, but there was nothing amusing about his presence. He radiated danger the way the chandeliers radiated light, and every eye in the ballroom was fixed upon him with a mixture of horror and fascination. Helena knew who he was immediately, even though they had never been formally introduced. Everyone in London knew the story of Damian Reavell, the disgraced Duke of Blackstone. 5 years ago, Damian had been one of the most promising young men in England. Brilliant, wealthy, charming, and blessed with the kind of dark good looks that made dowagers clutch their pearls and debutantes swoon behind their fans. He'd been poised to take his seat in Parliament to marry Lady Victoria Pemberton, a union that would have united two of the country's greatest fortunes, and to become one of the most powerful men in the realm. Then came the scandal. At a private card game hosted by Lord Peaton, Damian had been accused of cheating, marking cards, signaling to Confederates, the works. The evidence had been damning. Multiple witnesses, marked cards bearing his fingerprints, a signed confession from a servant who claimed Damian had paid him to spy on other players' hands. Damian had protested his innocence, of course. He'd claimed he was being framed, that the evidence was fabricated, that powerful men were conspiring against him. But who would believe such paranoid ramblings when the proof was so clear? The scandal had destroyed him. Victoria had broken their engagement. The Queen had stripped him of his honors. His own father, the old Duke, had died of shame within a month, leaving Damian with a title and an estate mortgaged to the hilt. Damian had disappeared into exile, fleeing to the continent while London society congratulated itself on exposing a scoundrel. That had been 5 years ago. 5 years of silence. 5 years during which Helena had occasionally wondered what had become of the disgraced Duke, though she'd never dared ask. Now here he stood, returned like a ghost from the past, and the look in his eyes suggested that exile had not mellowed him. Helena Stirling, Earl of Ashford, was the first to recover from the shock. Helena watched her brother detach himself from a cluster of admirers and stride toward the intruder, his handsome face arranged in an expression of cold disdain. Edmund was 31, tall and fair-haired, with the kind of classical features that graced Roman coins. He moved with the casual confidence of a man who had never been denied anything he wanted, and his voice when he spoke carried the full weight of his authority. "This is a private event, Reavell. You are not invited and you are not welcome. I suggest you leave before I have you thrown out." Damian didn't move. Water continued to drip from his coat, creating a slowly expanding puddle that seemed symbolic of the contamination his presence represented. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, but it carried to every corner of the suddenly silent ballroom. "I'm not here for your hospitality, Ashford. I'm here for justice." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Edmund's expression hardened. "You dare speak of justice? You, who cheated at cards like a common criminal? You, who brought shame upon one of England's oldest titles? The only justice you deserve is the social death you've already received. Is that what you tell yourself?" Damian took a step forward, and Helena saw several of Edmund's friends tense, ready to intervene if the disgraced Duke made any threatening moves. "Do you sleep well at night, knowing what you did to me? To my father? To my entire family?" "I did nothing to you except expose your crimes." Edmund's voice was ice. "You destroyed yourself through your own greed and dishonesty. Now leave before I have you arrested for trespassing." For a moment, Helena thought Damian would refuse. She could see the rage simmering beneath his controlled exterior, could sense the violence coiled in his rain-soaked frame like a spring compressed to its limit. But then his eyes shifted, scanning the crowd, and suddenly they locked onto hers. The impact was physical. Helena actually stumbled backward a step, one hand reaching out to grip Constance's arm for support. Those eyes, dark brown, almost black in the candlelight, seemed to see straight through her elaborate gown and perfect coiffure to something essential beneath. For a moment that stretched into eternity, the entire ballroom faded away. There was only Damian Reavell, dripping wet and dangerous, staring at her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. Recognition, certainly. Surprise, perhaps. And something else. Something that made her heart race and her breath catch in a way that had nothing to do with fear. Then the moment shattered. Damian's lips curved into something that might have been a smile if it had contained any warmth. He inclined his head slightly, a gesture that could have been a bow or an acknowledgement or a promise, and then he turned on his heel and walked back out into the storm, leaving nothing behind but wet footprints and a ballroom full of scandalized whispers. Edmund watched him go, His jaw clenched so tightly that Helena could see the muscle jumping beneath his skin. Then he clapped his hands sharply, the sound cutting through the murmurs like a whip crack. The excitement is over. Musicians, resume playing. Everyone, please return to your enjoyment. Some people have no sense of propriety, but we needn't let their poor judgment ruin our evening. The orchestra struck up a waltz, tentatively at first, then with more confidence as the crowd began to move again. Conversations resumed, though Helena noticed they were considerably more animated than before. Tomorrow's gossip columns would be absolutely ablaze with speculation about Damian Reavell's dramatic reappearance. Edmund strode directly toward her, his face dark with anger. "Helena, come with me, now." It wasn't a request. Helena allowed herself to be guided out of the ballroom, through the crowded hallway, and into Edmund's private study. He closed the door firmly behind them and turned to face her, his aristocratic features tight with fury. "Did you know he was coming back to London?" "What? No, how would I possibly know that?" Helena stared at her brother in confusion. "Edmund, I've never even met the man. Why would you think—" "I saw the way he looked at you." Edmund began to pace, his hands clasped behind his back. "I saw the way you looked at him. I was startled. Everyone was startled. A disgraced duke crashing your ball tends to generate a reaction." It was more than that. Edmund stopped pacing and fixed her with a hard stare. "Helena, I need you to promise me something. Stay away from Damian Reavell. If he attempts to contact you, you will refuse to see him. If he sends letters, you will burn them unread. If he approaches you in public, you will cut him dead. Do you understand?" Helena felt a familiar frustration rising in her chest. "I'm not a child, Edmund. I don't need you to dictate who I can and cannot speak to." "Yes, you do." Edmund's voice was flat, brooking no argument. "Because you don't understand how dangerous that man is. You don't know what he's capable of." "Then tell me," Helena challenged. "What is he capable of? You were there when the scandal broke. You testified against him at the inquiry. You told everyone he was a cheat and a liar. But what if what? Edmund's eyes narrowed dangerously. What if he was telling the truth? The words tumbled out before Helena could stop them. What if he really was framed? What if he's innocent, Edmund? The silence that followed was suffocating. Edmund stared at his sister as if she'd just suggested the sky was green or the Thames ran uphill. Then, slowly, he shook his head. "I'm going to pretend you didn't just say that," he said quietly. "I'm going to assume you're overwrought from the excitement of the evening and not thinking clearly. But Helena, hear me now. Damian Reavell is guilty. The evidence against him was overwhelming. I saw it with my own eyes. And if he's back in London, it's not for any good purpose. He's angry, bitter, and looking for someone to blame for his own failures. I will not have him targeting my sister in some misguided quest for revenge. But no." Edmund held up a hand, cutting her off. "This discussion is over. You will obey me in this, Helena, or there will be consequences. Am I clear?" Helena met her brother's gaze and saw the steel beneath his polished exterior. Edmund could be charming, generous, even kind, but he was also utterly unyielding when he believed himself to be in the right. She had learned long ago that open defiance only made him more stubborn. "Perfectly clear," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "Good." Edmund's expression softened slightly. "I know you think me overprotective, but everything I do is for your welfare. You're all I have left, Helena. Our parents are gone. You're my responsibility, and I take that responsibility seriously." "I know you do," Helena said, and she meant it. Edmund's control might chafe, but it came from genuine love, even if it was a love that manifested as possession. Edmund nodded, satisfied. "Go back to the ball. Dance. Smile. Show everyone that the Ashford family is unshakable, no matter what ghosts from the past might appear." Helena left the study and made her way back toward the ballroom, but her feet carried her past the entrance and toward the eastern window where she'd stood before Damian's arrival. The storm was beginning to abate, the rain falling now in steady sheets rather than torrential fury. Somewhere out there in the wet London night, Damian Reavell was planning something. She could feel it in her bones. "He's magnificent, isn't he?" Helena whirled to find Constance standing behind her, 2 fresh glasses of champagne in hand. She accepted one gratefully. Who? Helena asked, though she knew perfectly well who Constance meant. The disgraced Duke. Constance took a sip of her champagne, her eyes sparkling with mischief. I know we're supposed to despise him, but good Lord, Helena, did you see those eyes, that intensity? It's like something out of a Gothic novel. Constance, you're terrible. I'm honest. There's a difference. Constance moved to stand beside Helena at the window. What do you think he wants? Why come back now, after all this time? Edmund thinks it's revenge. Well, of course it's revenge, Constance said matter-of-factly. The man was ruined, his reputation destroyed, his fortune lost, his fiancée married someone else within 6 months. If he is innocent, and I'm not saying he is, but if he were, wouldn't you want revenge on the people who destroyed you? The inquiry found him guilty based on evidence, Helena said, but even to her own ears the words sounded uncertain. Did they, though? Or did they find him guilty based on testimony from men like your brother and Lord Peaton? Men who had everything to gain from eliminating a rival. Constance held up a hand as Helena started to protest. I'm not accusing Edmund of anything. I'm simply saying that 5 years ago, Damian Reavell was young, brilliant, and positioned to become incredibly powerful. There were men in Parliament who feared him, and now he's been conveniently removed from the board. You sound like one of those conspiracy theorists who think the government is hiding secrets in the Tower of London. Maybe, Constance grinned, or maybe I just pay attention to human nature. People with power don't like threats to that power. And Damian Reavell was definitely a threat. Before Helena could respond, the clock in the hallway chimed midnight. The ball would continue for several more hours, but Helena suddenly felt exhausted, drained by the evening's drama and her conversation with Edmund. I'm going to retire, she told Constance. Tell anyone who asks that I have a headache. It's not entirely a lie, Constance said sympathetically. Go rest. Tomorrow's gossip will be even more insufferable than usual. Helena made her way upstairs to her chambers, where her maid helped her out of the elaborate gown and into a simple nightdress. But sleep eluded her. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Damian Reavell standing in the ballroom doorway, water dripping from his coat, fury and purpose radiating from every line of his body, and she saw the way he'd looked at her. 3 days later, Helena was reading in the morning room when a footman appeared with a silver tray bearing a single letter. She recognized neither the handwriting nor the seal, but something made her pulse quicken as she broke the wax and unfolded the heavy paper. Lady Helena, I apologize for my dramatic appearance at your brother's ball. It was not my intention to disturb you or the other guests. However, I find I must speak with you regarding a matter of utmost importance, a matter that concerns both your brother and your family's honor. I realize this request is highly irregular, and I would understand if you refuse, but I ask you to meet me tomorrow afternoon at 3 o'clock in the ruins of St. Dunstan's Church in Stepney. Come alone, and tell no one. What I have to reveal will change everything you believe about your brother and the events of 5 years ago. I swear on my father's grave that I mean you no harm. I seek only truth and justice. Yours in hope, Damian Reavell, Duke of Blackstone. Helena read the letter 3 times, her heart pounding harder with each pass. This was exactly what Edmund had warned her against. She should burn the letter immediately, just as he'd instructed. She should inform her brother that the disgraced Duke was attempting to contact her. Instead, she found herself tucking the letter into the pocket of her dress and continuing with her mourning as if nothing had happened. That night, she barely slept. By the time dawn broke gray and uncertain over London, she had made her decision. It was reckless. It was dangerous. Edmund would be furious if he ever found out. But she was going to that meeting, because somewhere deep inside, beneath all the years of obedience and social conditioning, Helena Stirling was tired of living in a cage. And Damian Reavell, whatever else he might be, represented something she'd been denied her entire life. Freedom. The choice to decide for herself. The next afternoon, wearing a simple gray dress and a hooded cloak that obscured her distinctive features, Helena Stirling slipped out of Ashford House through the servants' entrance and made her way east into the heart of London's forgotten places, toward a ruined church and a meeting that would change her life forever. Thunder rumbled in the distance, promising another storm. The carriage rattled through Stepney's narrow streets, each pothole jarring Helena's already frayed nerves. She'd told her lady's maid she was visiting a charity hospital, a lie that came easier than it should have, and hired a public hansom cab rather than use one of Edmund's distinctive vehicles. The driver hadn't questioned her destination, though his eyebrows had risen when she'd given him the address. Stepney wasn't the sort of place ladies of quality visited, even in broad daylight. The further east they traveled, the more London transformed. The elegant townhouses and manicured parks of Mayfair gave way to cramped tenements and smoke-stained factories. Children in ragged clothes played in streets thick with mud and refuse. Women with hollow eyes and babies on their hips stood in doorways, watching the cab pass with expressions that held no hope, only endurance. This was the London Helena read about in her reform newspapers. The London Edmund pretended didn't exist. "Here, miss," the driver called down, pulling the horses to a stop before a structure that barely deserved the name church. St. Dunstan's had been abandoned for decades, its roof collapsed, its walls blackened by a long-ago fire. Weeds grew thick between broken paving stones, and the iron gate hung crooked on rusted hinges. Helena paid the driver and added an extra coin. "Wait for me, please. I won't be long." The man pocketed the money but shook his head. "I'll give you half an hour, miss, but no more. This ain't a neighborhood for lingering, if you catch my meaning." She caught it perfectly. Heart-hammering, Helena pushed through the gate and picked her way across the overgrown churchyard. The ruins offered dozens of places for someone to hide, to ambush an unwary woman. What if this was a trap? What if Damian meant her harm, after all? Edmund's warnings echoed in her mind, but she forced herself forward. She'd come this far. She wouldn't turn back now. "Lady Helena." She spun toward the voice. Damian emerged from behind a section of standing wall, and in the gray afternoon light, without the drama of the storm and the ballroom, Helena could see him clearly for the first time. He was older than she'd expected, 30 or perhaps 31, with a lean, hard face that suggested a man who'd learned to survive on very little. His clothes, though clean, were worn at the cuffs and collar. The greatcoat that had been soaked 3 nights ago was shabby in daylight, its fabric showing patches and careful mending. This was no wealthy duke. This was a man who'd known poverty. "You came," he said, and there was genuine surprise in his voice. "I thought after your brother's warning, you'd burn my letter and forget I existed." "How did you know Edmund warned me?" "Because I know your brother." Damian's expression hardened. "Control is his primary currency. He controls your household, your social circle, your access to information. Of course he warned you away from me. I'm dangerous to his narrative." Helena drew herself up, channeling years of deportment lessons into a facade of calm she didn't feel. "You said in your letter that you had information about my brother. Information that would change what I believe about him and about what happened 5 years ago. I'm here. Speak. Direct. I like that." Damian moved closer, and Helena noticed he walked with a slight limp, an injury she didn't remember from the ballroom. "Before I tell you what I know, I need to understand what you know. What has Edmund told you about the scandal? That you cheated at cards, that there were multiple witnesses, physical evidence, even a confession from one of your servants, that you claimed to be innocent, but the proof was overwhelming. And you believed him? Why wouldn't I? Edmund is my brother. He's never lied to me." Damian laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Lady Helena, your brother's entire life is a lie. The question is whether you're brave enough to see the truth, or if you'll retreat back to your comfortable ignorance." Anger flared hot in Helena's chest. "You don't know me, Your Grace. You don't know anything about my life or my relationship with my brother. I came here because I believe in fairness, in hearing all sides of a story before passing judgment. But if you're simply going to insult me, you're right." Damian held up his hands in a gesture of peace. "I apologize. That was unfair. You took an enormous risk coming here, and I'm grateful. Please, let me explain properly." Helena nodded stiffly, but didn't relax her guard. Damian took a breath, and when he spoke again, his voice was carefully controlled. 5 years ago, I was invited to a private card game at Lord Peaton's estate. The players were all men of influence, politicians, businessmen, a few aristocrats. Your brother was there. So was Lord Peaton himself, along with Sir James Worthing and the Honourable Charles Blackwood. We played for high stakes, but nothing unusual for men of our station. And you cheated? No. The word was sharp as a blade. I won. I won legitimately, using nothing but skill and a bit of luck. And in winning, I humiliated some very powerful men who weren't accustomed to losing, particularly your brother. Edmund gambles socially, but he's never been reckless about it. That night he was reckless. He was drunk and angry about some business deal that had gone wrong. He lost £3,000 to me in less than 2 hours. Damian's eyes locked onto Helena's. Do you know what £3,000 meant to Edmund 5 years ago? Helena frowned. Very little, I imagine. Edmund has always been wealthy. Edmund has always appeared wealthy. There's a difference. Damian began to pace, his limp more pronounced now. What I discovered later, much later, after I'd lost everything, was that your brother was drowning in debt. Your father had died 2 years earlier, leaving the estate mortgaged and the family coffers nearly empty. Edmund was living on credit and the expectation of a profitable marriage to Miss Charlotte Henshaw, whose father owned half the coal mines in Wales. Helena's frown deepened. She remembered Charlotte Henshaw. The engagement had ended abruptly, and Edmund had never spoken of it. The marriage was contingent on Edmund maintaining his reputation as a stable, reliable gentleman, Damian continued. Henshaw wouldn't hand his daughter and fortune to a gambling addict. So when Edmund lost £3,000, he didn't have. When I publicly humiliated him in front of men whose opinions mattered. He paused. He needed me gone. That's a convenient story, Helena said, but her voice wavered. You're suggesting my brother framed you for cheating because you won money from him? That's absurd. Is it? Think about what happened next. Within a week of that card game, I was accused of marking cards. The evidence appeared. Cards with my fingerprints, a servant's confession. I was ruined overnight, my engagement broken, my father dead from the shame. And Edmund? Edmund's debts mysteriously disappeared. The marriage to Charlotte Henshaw went through 6 months later, bringing him the fortune he desperately needed. Charlotte Henshaw married Lord Devon Ashworth, not Edmund. Because Edmund met someone even wealthier. Damian's smile was bitter. Lady Margaret Preston. Ring a bell? It did. Lady Margaret had been Edmund's wife for 3 years before dying in childbirth, along with the baby. The tragedy had devastated Edmund, and Helena had watched her brother retreat into work and isolation for months afterward. Margaret brought Edmund the Preston fortune, Damian said quietly. Coal mines, textile factories, shipping interests. He paid off his debts, restored the Ashford estate, and became one of the wealthiest men in England, all while I lost everything. Helena felt dizzy. Even if what you're saying is true, even if Edmund was in debt, that doesn't prove he framed you. You're asking me to believe my brother is capable of destroying an innocent man to save himself, that he would let your father die of shame, would ruin your life just for money? Not just for money, for survival. Damian moved closer, and Helena could see the pain in his eyes, old and deep. I don't expect you to believe me on my word alone. That's why I asked you here. I have proof. What kind of proof? Damian reached into his coat and withdrew a folded packet of papers. Letters. Between your brother and Lord Peaton, planning the entire scheme. Details about how to plant the marked cards, how to bribe my servant, how to ensure the inquiry would rule against me. I found them 6 months ago in France, among the effects of Peaton's deceased secretary. The man apparently kept copies of everything as insurance. Helena stared at the packet as if it were a venomous snake. If these letters are genuine, why haven't you taken them to the authorities? Why skulk in ruins and send mysterious notes? Because the authorities won't help me. Damian's voice turned harsh. I'm a disgraced duke with no money, no influence, and no friends in high places. Your brother is one of the most powerful men in England, with connections throughout Parliament and the courts. If I walk into Scotland Yard with these letters, they'll be dismissed as forgeries. I'll be arrested for slander or thrown into an asylum for delusions. The only way justice happens is if someone from inside Edmund's circle exposes him. Someone like me. Someone exactly like you. Damian held out the packet. Read them. Take them with you if you want. Have them authenticated by experts. I'm not asking you to trust me, Lady Helena. I'm asking you to trust evidence. Helena's hand trembled as she reached for the letters. The moment her fingers touched the paper, she knew her life was about to change. There would be no going back from this knowledge, no comfortable return to ignorance. She unfolded the first letter. The handwriting was Edmund's. She recognized his distinctive slanting script immediately. The date was 6 days after the card game Damian had mentioned. Peaton. The situation is more urgent than I indicated. Reavell must be eliminated from society entirely, and soon. The Henshaw marriage depends on my reputation remaining spotless. Have you secured the servants' cooperation? The marked cards must bear Reavell's prints clearly. Leave no room for doubt. I'll handle the witnesses at the inquiry. Make sure Blackwood and Worthing understand their roles. This must be executed flawlessly. Ashford. Helena's vision blurred. She forced herself to read the next letter and the next. Each one was more damning than the last. Details about paying the servant, instructions for planting evidence, discussions about which members of the inquiry could be influenced, and how. A casual mention of Damian's father's failing health, and how the scandal would likely resolve that problem naturally. Her brother's words, her brother's handwriting, her brother's conspiracy. No, she whispered. No, this can't be real. I wish it wasn't. Damian's voice was gentle now. I know what I'm asking you to accept. That the man who raised you, who claims to protect you, is capable of monstrous things. But Helena, may I call you Helena? She nodded mutely. Helena, this is who Edmund is. Not the caring brother who buys you beautiful dresses and hosts elegant parties. The man willing to destroy lives to protect his own interests. And if he did it to me, he'll do it to others. Perhaps he already has. Helena's mind raced. Memories flashed through her consciousness in rapid succession. Edmund's insistence on controlling every aspect of her life. His convenient marriage to Margaret Preston just months after Damian's scandal. The way he'd testified against Damian with such cold certainty. His warning 3 nights ago, stay away from Damian Reavell. He's dangerous. Not dangerous to her, dangerous to Edmund. Why show me this? Helena looked up from the letters, tears burning her eyes. What do you want from me? I want justice, Damian said simply. But I can't achieve it alone. I need someone Edmund trusts, someone who can get close to him, who can find more evidence or convince him to confess. Someone who... You want me to betray my brother. I want you to expose a criminal. Damian's jaw tightened. There's a difference. Is there? Helena's voice rose. You're asking me to destroy my own family, to tear apart everything I've ever known. Even if Edmund did what you claim, he's still my brother. He's still the person who cared for me when our parents died. How can you let him get away with it? Damian interrupted. My father died because of Edmund's lies. I lost 5 years of my life, my reputation, everything that mattered to me. And I'm not the only one he's hurt. Do you think a man capable of this stops at one victim? Helena clutched the letters to her chest, her mind fragmenting. I need time. I need to think. Time is something we don't have much of. Damian gestured toward the ruined church around them. Edmund knows I'm back in London. He'll be watching for any sign that I'm trying to expose him. If he suspects you're involved, he'll find a way to neutralize you, send you to the country, arrange a marriage, something to get you away from his secrets. Edmund wouldn't... But even as Helena spoke the words, she knew they were hollow. Edmund would absolutely do those things if he felt threatened. He'd done them before, she realized with sudden clarity. The various opportunities that had mysteriously fallen through. The suitor she'd genuinely liked who'd abruptly left London. The teaching position at the women's hospital she'd been offered and then seen rescinded without explanation. Edmund controlled everything, and anyone who threatened that control was eliminated. What exactly are you proposing? Helena asked, her voice steadier now. A partnership. You have access to Edmund's private papers, his correspondences, his social circle. You can observe him, learn his weaknesses, find leverage we can use. I have the initial evidence and the motivation to see this through. Together we can build a case strong enough that even Edmund's money and influence can't save him. And if we fail? If Edmund discovers what we're doing? Damian's expression was grim. Then we both lose everything. He'll find a way to discredit the letters as forgeries. I'll be arrested or worse. And you, he paused, You'll learn exactly how far your brother is willing to go to protect himself." The threat hung in the air between them. Helena should have been terrified. She should have gathered her skirts and run back to the safety of Ashford House, to the comfortable cage where at least she knew the rules. Instead, she felt something she'd never experienced before, a burning, righteous anger. "If I agree to help you," she said slowly, "I need your word that you won't harm Edmund physically. Whatever happens, whatever we discover, this must be resolved through law and society, not violence." "You have my word. And I need to know your true intentions. Is this really about justice, or is it about revenge?" Damian was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was raw with honesty. "I won't lie to you, Helena. Part of this is revenge. I want Edmund to feel what I felt. The humiliation, the loss, the betrayal. I want him to know what it's like to have everything stripped away. But it's also about justice. What Edmund did was wrong. He broke laws, destroyed lives, and faced no consequences. That can't stand. Even if it means destroying his family, his reputation, everything he's built. He built it on lies and theft." Damian stepped closer. "Helena, I understand your conflict. He's your brother. You love him. But love doesn't excuse evil, and protecting him makes you complicit." The words struck like a physical blow. Complicit. Was that what she'd been all these years? Enjoying the fruits of Edmund's crimes while remaining willfully blind to their source? "I need to go," Helena said abruptly. "My driver will leave if I don't return soon." "Will you help me?" Helena looked down at the letters still clutched in her hands. "I don't know. I need time to process this, to verify these are genuine. I can't commit to anything until I'm certain." "Fair enough." Damian pulled out a card with an address written in neat script. "This is where I'm staying. It's not much, but it's private. If you decide to help, or if you just need to talk, come find me." "And Helena?" "Yes? Be careful. Edmund is more dangerous than you realize. Don't let him suspect anything until you're ready to move." Helena nodded and turned to leave, but Damian's voice stopped her. "One more thing. That night at the ball, when I looked at you, I wasn't planning on that. I came for Edmund, but then I saw you and—" He trailed off, seeming uncertain for the first time. "Just be careful, please." Helena fled the ruins without responding, her heart pounding and the letters burning through her cloak like hot coals. The cab was waiting, and she climbed in without meeting the driver's eyes, afraid of what he might see in her face. The journey back to Mayfair passed in a blur. Helena's mind spun through the implications of what she'd learned, testing and retesting each piece of information. The letters could be forgeries, she told herself. Damian could be a brilliant liar with an artist's skill at faking handwriting. This could all be an elaborate scheme to manipulate her into betraying Edmund. But the evidence fit too well. The dates, the details, the way Edmund had behaved during and after the scandal, the mysterious improvement in their financial situation, Margaret Preston's convenient appearance and equally convenient death. Helena's blood went cold. Could Edmund have had something to do with Margaret's death? No, that was paranoia talking. Margaret had died in childbirth. Women died in childbirth every day. It was tragic, but natural, wasn't it? By the time the cab deposited her at the servants' entrance of Ashford House, Helena had made a decision. She would investigate. Carefully, quietly, without alerting Edmund. She would verify the letter's authenticity, search for additional evidence, and only then would she decide whether to help Damian. She owed her brother that much, and she owed herself the truth. Helena slipped into the house and made it to her chambers without encountering anyone except a housemaid, who curtsied and continued with her duties. Once alone, Helena locked the door and hid the letters in a hollowed-out book on her shelf, a cheap novel Edmund would never deign to read. Then she sat at her writing desk and began to make notes. Dates, names, details she could cross-reference. If she was going to do this, she would do it methodically. A knock at her door made her jump. She shoved the notes into a drawer and called, "Yes? Miss Helena?" Her maid's voice came through the wood. "His lordship requests your presence in the drawing room. He has a guest he wishes you to meet." Helena's stomach dropped. "I'll be down shortly." She checked her appearance in the mirror, pale but composed, and descended the stairs with a sense of impending doom. What if Edmund knew somehow? What if he'd had her followed? But when she entered the drawing room, Edmund was all smiles. He stood beside a tall, silver-haired gentleman she'd never seen before. "Ah, Helena, there you are. Allow me to introduce Lord William Hartley. Lord Hartley, my sister, Lady Helena Stirling." Lord Hartley bowed with practiced grace. He was perhaps 50, distinguished, with the bearing of military service and the confidence of wealth. "Lady Helena, your brother has told me so much about you. It's a pleasure to finally make your acquaintance." "Lord Hartley has recently returned from India," Edmund continued, his tone carefully casual. "He's purchased an estate in Derbyshire and is looking to settle into country life. I thought you two might enjoy discussing his travels. Helena has always been fascinated by exotic places, haven't you, sister?" Helena understood immediately what was happening. This was Edmund's solution to the Damian problem. Find her a husband, preferably one who would take her far away from London. Lord Hartley was probably perfectly pleasant, respectably wealthy, and geographically convenient. "How interesting," Helena said, her voice sweet as poisoned honey. "Though I confess, Lord Hartley, my brother may have overstated my fascination. I'm much more interested in the challenges facing our own country. The poverty in our cities, the working conditions in our factories, the lack of medical care for the poor." Lord Hartley's smile faltered slightly. Edmund's jaw tightened. "Helena volunteers with charitable organizations," Edmund said quickly. "An admirable pursuit for a lady, though, of course, such matters can be distressing." "I don't find them distressing at all," Helena said. "I find them illuminating. It's remarkable what one learns about society's true nature when one looks beyond the ballrooms and dinner parties." The conversation limped along for another excruciating 30 minutes. Helena was perfectly polite but determinedly uncharming. She discussed factory reform with graphic detail, mentioned her interest in medical studies, scandalous for a woman of her station, and generally made it clear that she was no docile flower waiting to be plucked and transplanted to Derbyshire. Lord Hartley made his excuses and departed earlier than social convention strictly required. The moment the door closed behind him, Edmund's facade cracked. "What the devil was that?" he demanded. "A conversation," Helena replied innocently. "You did ask me to entertain your guest. I asked you to make a good impression, not lecture the man on social reform like some radical pamphleteer." Edmund's face was flushed with anger. "Lord Hartley is a respectable gentleman with an excellent reputation and a substantial estate. He would be an ideal husband for you." "Then perhaps you should marry him." "Helena," Edmund's voice rose dangerously, "I am trying to protect you, to secure your future. Why must you fight me at every turn?" "Because I don't need protection," Helena said, her own temper flaring. "I need freedom. I need to be treated as an adult capable of making my own choices. I'm 23 years old, Edmund. When will you stop controlling every aspect of my life?" "When you demonstrate the maturity to make sound decisions," Edmund was shouting now. "You have no idea how dangerous the world is, how easily a woman of your station can be ruined by poor judgment. I am trying to save you from yourself." "Or from the truth," Helena said quietly. The words hung between them like a drawn blade. Edmund's eyes narrowed. "What does that mean?" Helena's heart raced, but she forced herself to meet his gaze steadily. "It means I'm tired of half-truths and convenient explanations. It means I want to understand why you're so determined to marry me off to the first acceptable man who appears. It means you've been thinking too much." Edmund's voice dropped to something more dangerous than shouting. "Helena, has someone been speaking to you, filling your head with nonsense about me or our family?" "Like who?" Helena challenged. "Your enemies, the men you've ruined?" Edmund went very still. "What do you know about Damian Reavell?" "Only what you've told me, that he's a cheat and a liar. And yet you defend him." "I'm not defending anyone," Helena said. "I'm asking questions. There's a difference." Edmund studied her for a long moment, his aristocratic features unreadable. Then abruptly, he turned away. "Go to your room. We'll discuss this when you're calmer." "I'm perfectly calm." "Go. Now." It was the voice he used with servants, with subordinates, with anyone he considered beneath him. Helena felt the old, familiar urge to obey, to smooth over the conflict and retreat to the safety of her prescribed role. Instead, she lifted her chin. "I'll go because I choose to, Edmund, not because you ordered it. Remember that." She left the drawing room with her head high, but once safely back in her chambers, her composure shattered. Helena sank onto her bed, trembling with reaction. She'd never defied Edmund so openly before. The rush of it was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. She'd crossed a line tonight. Edmund knew something was wrong. He'd be watching her now, suspicious and alert, which meant she had to move faster than planned. Helena retrieved the letters from their hiding place and read them again by candlelight, memorizing every detail. Then she began to formulate a plan. She needed allies, people who could verify the document's authenticity without alerting Edmund. She needed access to his private study, to his correspondence, to the secrets he kept locked away. And she needed to see Damian again. The thought sent a thrill through her that had nothing to do with the investigation. Against all reason, despite everything, she wanted to see him, wanted to hear his voice, see the intensity in his dark eyes, feel the way her pulse quickened when he was near. It was dangerous. It was foolish. It was exactly the kind of poor judgment Edmund warned her against. Helena smiled in the darkness. For the first time in her life, she was going to embrace danger. Embrace foolishness. Embrace the possibility that everything she'd been taught about duty and obedience and knowing one's place was wrong. She was going to find the truth. And when she did, Edmund's carefully constructed world was going to burn. 3 days after her confrontation with Edmund, Helena stood in front of her brother's study door at 2 a.m, a skeleton key trembling in her hand. The house was silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway and the thundering of her own heart. She'd watched Edmund's patterns for 72 hours. He retired at 11, took laudanum for his headaches, a habit she'd never noticed before, and slept heavily until dawn. The servants were all in their quarters by midnight. This window, between 2 and 4 in the morning, was her only opportunity. The key slid into the lock with a soft click that sounded like a gunshot in the darkness. Helena froze, listening, but no doors opened. No footsteps approached. She turned the key slowly, felt the mechanism give, and pushed the door open just wide enough to slip through. Edmund's study smelled of leather, tobacco, and old paper. Heavy curtains blocked the moonlight, forcing Helena to work by the light of a single candle she'd brought with her. The flame cast wild shadows across walls lined with books and hunting trophies, a mounted stag's head, a tiger skin rug, symbols of Edmund's dominance over weaker creatures. His desk dominated the center of the room, its surface unnaturally clear. Edmund was meticulous about organization, which meant anything truly important would be locked away. Helena tried the desk drawers one by one. The top 3 opened easily, revealing nothing but routine correspondence, bills, and social invitations. The bottom drawer was locked. She'd anticipated this. Among her mother's jewelry, pieces Edmund never looked at because they held no monetary value, Helena had found a set of tiny picks her mother had apparently used for some forgotten purpose. It took 10 agonizing minutes and 2 broken picks before the drawer's lock finally surrendered. Inside were 3 leather-bound ledgers and a small wooden box. Helena opened the first ledger, her hand shaking so badly she could barely turn the pages. What she found made her stomach turn. Payments. Dozens of them, dating back 6 years. £500 to J. Morrison, silence regarding MP matter. £1,000 to T. Wellington, services rendered, Blackstone affair. £2,000 to Lord Peaton, consultation fees various. The Blackstone affair. Damian's scandal. Here was proof of payments made around the same time as the letters Damian had shown her. Helena photographed the pages mentally, committing amounts and dates to memory. The second ledger was worse. It contained detailed notes about people Edmund considered threats or obstacles. There were pages about business rivals, political opponents, and, Helena's blood went cold, about Damian's father, the old Duke. Subject increasingly vocal about son's innocence, has been making inquiries, demanding reinvestigation. Health failing, physician confirms weak heart. Likelihood of natural expiration within 6 months if stress maintained. Continue pressure. The date was 3 weeks before the old Duke's death. Edmund hadn't just framed Damian. He deliberately engineered circumstances to kill his father. Helena's hands went numb. The ledger slipped from her grasp and hit the desk with a soft thud that seemed impossibly loud. She stood frozen, unable to process what she'd just read. Her brother, the man who'd raised her, who claimed to love her, was a murderer. Find anything interesting? Helena spun around so fast her candle nearly fell. Edmund stood in the doorway, still in his nightclothes, but his eyes were fully alert. In his hand, he held a small pistol pointed directly at her chest. Edmund, I can explain. Can you? He stepped into the room and closed the door behind him with his foot, never taking his eyes off her. Please, illuminate me. What possible explanation could justify my sister breaking into my private study in the middle of the night? Helena's mind raced. Lies cascaded through her thoughts, each one more desperate than the last, but Edmund's expression told her he'd see through anything she invented. The only option left was partial truth. I needed to know if Damian Reavell was telling the truth. Edmund's face remained impassive, but something flickered in his eyes. So you have seen him again. I suspected as much. Your little excursion to Stepney wasn't as subtle as you imagined. You had me followed? I have you protected, Edmund corrected. There's a difference. Though clearly my precautions weren't thorough enough if Reavell managed to poison your mind against me. He didn't poison anything, Helena said, finding courage in her anger. He showed me letters you wrote to Lord Peaton planning Damian's downfall. I thought they might be forgeries, so I came here to prove him wrong, to find evidence that would exonerate you. And instead you found evidence of my guilt. Edmund's smile was cold. How disappointing for you. Tell me, Helena, what did dear Damian promise you? Love, freedom, a chance to escape your terrible, controlling brother? He promised me the truth, which is more than you've ever given me. Edmund laughed, but there was no humor in it. The truth. How naive you are. The truth is that I saved this family from ruin. Our father was a drunk and a fool who gambled away our fortune and died leaving us drowning in debt. I was 26 years old with a sister to protect and creditors circling like sharks. So yes, I did what was necessary. I eliminated threats. I acquired resources. I built the life you now enjoy. By destroying innocent people. Innocent? Edmund's voice turned sharp. Damian Reavell was a threat to everything I'd worked for. He was brilliant, charismatic, and positioned to take a parliamentary seat I needed for my coal interests. The Henshaw marriage was my lifeline, and Reavell's public humiliation of me threatened to destroy it. So I removed him from the board. It was business, Helena, nothing personal. His father died. His father was weak. He couldn't survive the scandal. That's not my fault. Helena stared at her brother as if seeing him for the first time. How can you be so callous? These are people's lives you destroyed, families ruined, deaths caused, and you speak of it like moving chess pieces. Because that's exactly what it is. Edmund moved closer, the pistol steady in his hand. The world is a chessboard, Helena. There are those who play the game and those who are played. I refuse to be a pawn. If that makes me a monster in your eyes, so be it. I'd rather be a monster who survives than a saint who starves. What are you going to do? Helena's voice came out smaller than she intended. Shoot me? Your own sister? Of course not. Edmund lowered the pistol slightly. But I can't let you destroy everything I've built either. You're going to marry Lord Hartley. The wedding will take place in 3 weeks. You'll move to Derbyshire, far from London and far from Damian Reavell's influence. In time, you'll forget this foolishness and thank me for protecting you from your own poor judgment. I won't marry him. You can't force me. Can't I? Edmund's smile was cruel. You have 2 choices, Helena. Marry Hartley and live a comfortable life as a country lady, or refuse and watch me destroy Damian Reavell completely. Not just his reputation this time, his life. I have connections in every corner of this city. One word from me and Reavell will be arrested for trespassing, assault, attempted extortion, whatever charges I need to fabricate. He'll hang, Helena. And you'll know it was your defiance that killed him. The threat hung in the air like poison gas. Helena felt trapped, suffocating, exactly as she'd felt her entire life, but 1,000 times worse. Edmund had always controlled her, but she'd told herself it was love, protection, care. Now the mask had fallen away, revealing the calculating predator beneath. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered. "Because I love you." Edmund's voice softened, and somehow that was worse than his cruelty. "You're all I have left of our family. I won't lose you to some disgraced fortune hunter seeking revenge. This is for your own good, Helena. Someday you'll understand." He moved to the desk and began gathering the ledgers she'd been reading. "I'll be increasing security around the house. You're not to leave without my explicit permission. Your correspondence will be monitored. And if you attempt to contact Reavell again, I'll know, and I'll act immediately. Do you understand?" Helena nodded, her throat too tight for words. "Good. Now go back to your room. We'll discuss wedding arrangements in the morning." Helena walked past her brother on legs that felt like wood. She could feel the pistol's presence, even though Edmund had lowered it completely. The threat didn't need to be visible to be real. She made it to her chambers and locked the door, then collapsed against it as silent tears streamed down her face. She was trapped. If she defied Edmund, Damian would die. If she obeyed, she'd be exiled to Derbyshire while Edmund continued his machinations unchecked. There was no winning move, unless she changed the game entirely. Helena stood and wiped her eyes. She'd spent her whole life accepting Edmund's version of reality, letting him define the boundaries of her world. But he'd made one critical mistake tonight. He'd revealed the full extent of his crimes, and in doing so, he'd shown her exactly how to destroy him. She couldn't do it alone. She needed Damian, but how could she reach him with Edmund's men watching her every move? The answer came to her with sudden clarity: Constance. Her friend had been suspicious of Edmund's story from the beginning, and Constance had something Helena lacked: freedom of movement. No one watched Lord Fairfax's daughter the way they watched the Earl of Ashford's sister. Helena wrote a quick note, sealed it, and hid it in the binding of her Bible, the one book Edmund would never think to check. Tomorrow she'd find a way to pass it to Constance. The note contained just 2 words and an address: "Help me." But getting the note to Constance proved harder than anticipated. The next morning, Edmund informed her that Constance had left London for Bath with her family, a sudden trip that seemed suspiciously convenient. Helena's maid, who'd been with her for 5 years, was replaced with an older woman named Mrs. Graves, who watched her constantly with cold, assessing eyes. Helena was a prisoner in her own home. Days blurred together. Wedding preparations proceeded with mechanical efficiency. Lord Hartley visited twice, both times with Edmund present. The man seemed pleasant enough in a distant way, but Helena could barely speak to him without feeling sick. Her wedding dress was commissioned. Invitations were printed. The church was reserved. Edmund acted as if nothing had changed between them. He was attentive, generous even, buying her expensive jewelry for the wedding and praising her docility. But Helena saw the calculation behind every gesture. This was how Edmund controlled people, through carrots and sticks, rewards and threats, always maintaining just enough affection to keep the victim complicit in their own imprisonment. A week before the wedding, Helena made her move. Mrs. Graves had a weakness. She drank. Not obviously, but Helena had noticed the slight unsteadiness in the evening, the smell of gin disguised with peppermint. So Helena began leaving glasses of wine around her room, claiming she'd poured too much and couldn't finish it. Mrs. Graves, thinking herself unobserved, would drain them. On the 7th night, Helena spiked 1 glass with 3 times the normal dose of laudanum she'd stolen from Edmund's supply. Mrs. Graves drank it around 9 o'clock and was unconscious by 10. Helena waited until midnight, then changed into dark, simple clothes, a maid's uniform she'd pilfered from the laundry. She pulled her hair back severely, dirtied her face with ash from the fireplace, and became invisible. Just another servant moving through Ashford House in the dark. Getting past Edmund's extra security required timing and luck. She moved during the guards' patrol rotations, used servants' passages she'd explored as a child, and finally slipped out through the kitchen entrance just after 2 in the morning. London at night was a different city, dangerous, alive, thrumming with activity that respectable society never saw. Helena kept to the shadows, moving quickly through streets she barely recognized without their daytime crowds. Twice she had to hide from groups of rough-looking men. Once a constable passed close enough that she held her breath, certain she'd be caught. Damian's address was in Clerkenwell, a working-class neighborhood that made even Stepney look prosperous. The building was a decrepit boarding house with windows that hadn't been washed in years. Helena climbed the narrow stairs to the third floor, her heart hammering so hard she felt faint. She knocked on door number 7. No answer. She knocked again, harder, and heard movement inside. The door opened a crack, and Damian's face appeared, eyes widening in shock when he recognized her. "Helena, what in God's—" He caught himself. "What are you doing here? Do you have any idea how dangerous—" "Let me in," she interrupted. "Please, I don't have much time." But Damian pulled her inside and locked the door. The room was tiny. A bed, a desk, a single chair, and nothing else. Papers covered every surface, and the air smelled of ink and desperation. "Edmund knows," Helena said without preamble. "He caught me in his study. He knows I met with you, knows about the letters. He's forcing me to marry Lord Hartley in 6 days. If I refuse, he threatened to have you arrested and hanged on false charges." Damian went very still. "When did this happen?" "A week ago. He's had me under guard ever since. This is the first chance I've had to escape." Helena pulled the notes she'd memorized from Edmund's ledgers out of her bodice. "But before he caught me, I found these. Evidence of payments to Lord Peaton and others. Notes about your father's death. Edmund didn't just frame you, Damian. He deliberately stressed your father to induce the heart attack that killed him. It's murder. Premeditated murder." Damian took the papers with shaking hands. As he read, his face transformed from shock to rage to something colder and more frightening than either. "This is enough," he said quietly. "This is enough to hang him. Maybe, but we need more. We need his original ledgers, not just my notes. We need the letters between him and Peaton. We need witnesses willing to testify despite their fear of Edmund's power." Helena moved closer. "I have a plan, but it's dangerous, and it requires your help." "Anything." Helena took a breath. "There's a banquet in 5 days. The annual parliamentary dinner at Lord Preston's estate. Every important political figure in England will be there, including the Prime Minister. Edmund will attend. He never misses it. That's our opportunity." "To do what?" "To expose him publicly, in front of witnesses who matter, people whose opinion even Edmund can't control. But we need evidence we can present on the spot. Original documents, not copies. Ledgers, letters, proof so overwhelming that Edmund can't talk his way out." Damian was already shaking his head. "Helena, if we accuse him publicly and fail, we're both dead. Edmund will destroy us and he'll be more careful afterward. We only get one shot at this." "I know. That's why we need to break into Ashford House the night before the banquet and steal everything, the ledgers, the correspondence, anything that could incriminate him. While he's at the banquet, I'll arrange for his private study to be searched by authorities. But we need to move first, to secure the evidence before he can destroy it." "You're talking about burglary. If we're caught—" "We won't be caught, because I know every inch of that house. I know the guard rotations Edmund established. I know where he keeps his keys, where the servants sleep, where the ledgers are stored." Helena's voice was fierce. "This is our chance, Damian, possibly our only chance. If I marry Hartley and leave London, Edmund wins. The truth dies. Your father's murder goes unavenged. Is that what you want?" "You know it isn't." "Then help me." Damian studied her face for a long moment. "If we do this, there's no going back. Edmund is your brother. Even if we succeed, even if we expose him, your family name will be destroyed. You'll be the sister of a convicted criminal. Society will shun you. Are you prepared for that?" Helena thought of Edmund's cold smile, his casual dismissal of the lives he'd ruined, his absolute certainty that he could control her forever. "Yes, I'm prepared." "Then we do it together." Damian reached out and took her hand. The contact sent electricity through Helena's entire body. 2 nights from now, we hit Ashford House. I'll need to scout the location first, plan our route. I can draw you maps, floor plans, guard positions, everything. But Damian, there's something else." Helena hesitated, then pushed forward. "At the banquet, when we expose Edmund, he'll try to discredit us. He'll call me a hysterical woman, you a vengeful liar. We need someone beyond reproach to present the evidence. Someone Edmund can't dismiss." "Who do you have in mind?" "Lord Chief Justice Pemberton. He oversees all criminal prosecutions in England. He's honest, incorruptible, and he'll be at the banquet. If we can get the evidence to him beforehand, get him to review it, he could make the accusation formally. Edmund couldn't silence him without destroying himself. Damian's eyes widened. Pemberton was supposed to be my father-in-law. Before the scandal, I was engaged to his daughter Victoria. He believed I was guilty, testified against me at the inquiry. Why would he help us now? Because he's an honest man who made a mistake based on false evidence. If we show him the truth, the real truth, not Edmund's fabrications, he'll act. Justice matters to him more than pride. It's risky. Everything about this is risky. Helena squeezed his hand, but it's our best chance. Will you trust me? Damian pulled her closer, and Helena's breath caught. They were standing so near now that she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, could feel the heat radiating from his body. I've trusted you since the moment you came to St. Dunstan's, he said softly. Against all logic, against my better judgment. There's something about you, Helena Stirling, something that makes me believe in possibilities I'd given up on. Like justice? Like everything. His hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing across her cheekbone. You're extraordinary. You know that? Helena had been called many things, beautiful, accomplished, refined, but never extraordinary. The word unlocked something inside her, some barrier she'd maintained between who she was and who she could be. She kissed him. It wasn't planned, wasn't calculated. It was pure instinct, pure need, the culmination of every moment since she'd first seen him standing in the ballroom doorway. Damian responded immediately, pulling her against him, one hand tangling in her hair while the other wrapped around her waist. The kiss was desperate, fierce, flavored with danger and defiance. Helena had never been kissed before. Edmund had made sure of that, and the sensation was overwhelming. Every nerve in her body came alive. She pressed closer, wanting more, needing... Damian pulled back abruptly, breathing hard. Helena, we can't. We're not. Don't, she said fiercely. Don't you dare tell me what I can and cannot do. I've had a lifetime of men controlling my choices. Not you. Not now. I'm trying to protect. I don't need protection. Helena's voice rose. I need partnership, equality, someone who sees me as more than a fragile thing to be managed. Can you do that, Damian? Can you see me as your equal? Damian stared at her, and slowly, his expression shifted into something like wonder. You're not just my equal, Helena. You're better than me, braver, stronger. Everything I should have been 5 years ago when Edmund destroyed me. Then stop treating me like I'm made of glass. He kissed her again, and this time there was no hesitation, no holding back. They stumbled toward the narrow bed, mouths locked together, hands exploring with increasing urgency. Helena's rational mind screamed warnings. This was reckless, dangerous, exactly the kind of behavior that ruined women, but she silenced it. She was tired of being careful, tired of being good. Damian broke the kiss long enough to look at her seriously. If we do this, if we cross this line, Edmund will use it against you. He'll call you a whore, claim I seduced you, destroy whatever reputation you have left. Let him. Helena began unbuttoning her borrowed maid's uniform. My reputation has been a cage as much as anything else. I'm done caring what society thinks. Helena, make love to me, Damian. Please. Before we face whatever's coming, I want this. I want you. I want to choose something for myself. What followed was clumsy and urgent and completely perfect. They learned each other's bodies in the darkness of that shabby room, creating a bond that went far deeper than physical pleasure. This was rebellion. This was reclamation. This was Helena Stirling becoming someone new, someone who refused to be controlled. Afterward, lying tangled together in the narrow bed, Helena felt utterly transformed. Her body ached in unfamiliar ways, but her spirit soared. I love you, Damian said quietly. I know it's too soon. I know we barely know each other, but I love you. Not just because you're helping me, because of who you are, your courage, your fire, the way you refuse to accept the world's limitations. Helena's heart clenched. I love you too, which is terrifying because everything could go wrong in the next few days. Then we make sure it doesn't. Damian propped himself on one elbow, looking down at her. 2 nights from now, we raid Ashford House. We get the evidence. Then we take it to Pemberton and convince him to act. At the banquet, we expose Edmund in front of everyone who matters. And when it's done, when he's been arrested and charged, we start a new life, together. You make it sound so simple. It won't be, but it's worth fighting for. He kissed her forehead. You should go. If Mrs. Graves wakes and finds you missing, she won't wake for hours, but you're right. Helena reluctantly disentangled herself and began dressing. Meet me in 2 nights at the corner of Berkeley Square at midnight. I'll get us into the house. Be careful, Helena. Edmund is dangerous. So am I, she said with a fierce smile. He just doesn't know it yet. The journey back to Ashford House was easier than the outbound trip. Helena was beginning to understand the rhythms of London's dark hours. She slipped back through the kitchen entrance, navigated the servants' passages, and made it to her room just as the sky was beginning to lighten. Mrs. Graves was still unconscious, snoring softly in her chair. Helena cleaned the ash from her face, changed back into her nightgown, and climbed into bed. She should have been exhausted, but adrenaline kept her alert. She'd crossed the Rubicon tonight. There was no turning back now, no possibility of reconciliation with Edmund. In 2 nights, she would betray her brother, steal from him, potentially destroy him completely, and she felt absolutely no guilt. The next 2 days passed in agonizing slowness. Edmund continued his wedding preparations, oblivious to Helena's plans. Lord Hartley sent flowers. The seamstress delivered the wedding dress. Helena smiled and nodded and played the obedient sister while mentally counting down the hours until midnight. The evening before the break-in, Edmund summoned her to dinner. Just the 2 of them in the formal dining room, an intimate meal that felt like a mockery of familial affection. You've been very quiet lately, Edmund observed, cutting into his roast beef. I'm pleased. It suggests you've accepted the wisdom of my decisions. I've been thinking, Helena said carefully, about family, about loyalty, about what we owe the people who raised us. Edmund smiled. And have you reached any conclusions? Yes. Helena met his eyes across the table. I've concluded that loyalty must be earned, not demanded, and that family means nothing if it's built on lies. Edmund's smile faded. Helena, I'm going to marry Lord Hartley, she continued before he could finish. I'll move to Derbyshire as you wish. But know this, Edmund, you haven't won. You've just ensured that I'll spend the rest of my life hating you. For a moment, genuine pain crossed Edmund's face. Then it hardened back into aristocratic stone. Your hatred is a price I'm willing to pay for your safety. Is it really about my safety, or is it about control? What's the difference? Edmund set down his fork. The world is cruel to women who step outside their prescribed roles. I'm saving you from learning that lesson the hard way. By trapping me in a loveless marriage to a stranger? By giving you the stability and security every woman needs? Edmund's voice turned cold. This conversation is over. Finish your dinner. Helena obeyed mechanically, forcing down food that tasted like sawdust. After dinner, she retired to her chambers and prepared for the night ahead. She packed a small bag with dark clothes, lockpicks, and the detailed floor plans she'd drawn for Damian. She wrote a letter to be discovered later, explaining everything in case the plan failed and she didn't survive. Then she waited. Midnight came with agonizing slowness. Mrs. Graves had drunk her drugged wine and collapsed right on schedule. Helena changed into her dark clothing, grabbed her bag, and made her way through the sleeping house one final time. The guard's rotation left a 40-second gap at the northeast entrance. Helena slipped through it with seconds to spare and ran toward Berkeley Square, her heart pounding with fear and exhilaration. Damian was waiting exactly where they'd agreed, dressed in dark clothing that made him nearly invisible in the shadows. He pulled her into a brief, fierce embrace. Ready? Ready? They moved through the darkness together, two shadows with a single purpose. The plan was simple. Enter through the servants' entrance Helena had left unlocked, make their way to Edmund's study, steal the ledgers and letters, and escape before the dawn guard rotation. 30 minutes, maximum. Everything went perfectly at first. They got into the house without incident, navigated the dark hallways without encountering any servants, reached Edmund's study, and began gathering documents. Then the door opened, and every candle in the room blazed to life simultaneously. Edmund stood in the doorway, fully dressed, a pistol in each hand. Behind him were 6 men, private guards, all armed, all blocking the only exit. Did you really think I wouldn't know? Edmund's voice was calm, almost conversational. Did you think I wouldn't notice the laudanum missing from my supply? The floor plans gone from my desk drawer? The way you've been counting down the hours? Helena's blood turned to ice. Edmund, I've been expecting you both. Edmund gestured with one pistol toward Damian. The disgraced Duke breaking into a peer's home to steal valuable documents. That's burglary, a hanging offense, and my poor manipulated sister seduced and corrupted by a vengeful criminal. What a tragedy. What a scandal. You planned this, Helena whispered. You wanted us to come. I gave you every opportunity to be reasonable, Edmund said. I offered you a good marriage, a clean escape, a chance to forget this foolishness. Instead, you chose him. His eyes shifted to Damian with pure hatred. You couldn't leave well enough alone. 5 years of exile wasn't enough. You had to come back, had to corrupt my sister, had to threaten everything I've built. Everything you've stolen, Damian corrected. He'd moved slightly in front of Helena, a protective instinct that would have been touching if it wasn't futile. Everything you've murdered for. Semantics. Edmund cocked both pistols. Here's what happens now. My guards witnessed you breaking into my home. They saw you attacking me when I discovered you. They'll testify that I shot you in self-defense. Reavell, you'll die here tonight. Helena, you'll be sent to an asylum for nervous disorders, a victim of Reavell's manipulation. In a year or two, once you've learned proper obedience, perhaps I'll allow you to return to society. Chastened, compliant, broken. You won't shoot us, Helena said, but her voice shook. We're not alone. People know we're here. If we disappear, who knows? Your friend Constance, she's in Bath. Reavell's boarding house acquaintances, they'll assume he fled the country again. You have no allies, Helena. You have nothing. Edmund raised the pistol aimed at Damian. Goodbye, Your Grace. I'll give your regards to hell. The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space, but Edmund didn't fire it. He collapsed instead, a red stain blooming across his shoulder. Behind him, smoke rose from a pistol held by someone Helena had never expected to see. Lord Chief Justice Pemberton stepped into the room, followed by 4 constables and a familiar figure Helena recognized with shock, Constance Fairfax, very much not in Bath. Edmund Stirling, Earl of Ashford, Pemberton's voice was iron. You are under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, and the murder of Duke Robert Reavell. Do not resist or I'll have these officers shoot you again, this time with less regard for your survival. Edmund stared at the wound in his shoulder, then at Pemberton, then at Helena. How? You underestimated your sister, Constance said cheerfully, stepping around the constables. She sent me a message over a week ago. I've been working with Lord Pemberton ever since, verifying the evidence, building a case. Tonight was just the final proof we needed, your attempt to murder witnesses to your crimes. Damian pulled Helena against him, and she clung to his coat, shaking with reaction. You knew, she said to Constance. You knew we were walking into a trap. We suspected Edmund would try something, Constance admitted. So we made sure you wouldn't face it alone. Pemberton's been watching the house all night. When Edmund gathered his guards and waited in the study, we knew he was planning murder. Pemberton stepped forward, looking at Damian with an expression of profound regret. Your Grace, I owe you an apology. 5 years ago, I allowed myself to be deceived by fabricated evidence and the testimony of men I trusted. I condemned an innocent man and contributed to your father's death. That is a sin I'll carry for the rest of my life. I cannot undo the past, but I can ensure that justice is served now. He turned to the constables. Take Lord Ashford into custody. Call for a physician to treat his wound, but do not leave him unguarded for a single moment. He is a dangerous man. As the constables dragged Edmund away, he locked eyes with Helena one final time. You've destroyed our family, he said quietly. Everything I built, everything I sacrificed for. Gone, because you couldn't trust me. No, Helena said, her voice steady despite her tears. You destroyed our family the day you chose power over honor, the day you framed Damian, the day you murdered his father. This isn't my fault, Edmund. It's yours. Edmund laughed, a broken, bitter sound, as the constables hauled him toward the door. You think you've won? You'll be ruined by this, both of you. The sister who betrayed her brother, the disgraced duke who seduced her. London will tear you apart." "Let them try," Damian said, pulling Helena closer. "We've survived worse." As Edmund disappeared into the night, Helena felt something inside her finally break free. The cage that had held her for 23 years shattered, and for the first time in her life, she could breathe. But even as relief flooded through her, she knew Edmund was right about one thing. The real battle was just beginning. The real battle was just beginning. The morning after Edmund's arrest, London exploded with scandal. By breakfast, every household from Mayfair to Westminster knew that the Earl of Ashford had been taken into custody. By lunch, the newspapers were screaming headlines about conspiracy, murder, and the fall of one of England's most powerful families. By dinner, Helena Stirling's name was being whispered in every drawing room, club, and coffeehouse in the city. Most of those whispers were not kind. Helena stood at the window of Pemberton's townhouse, where she'd been staying under the Lord Chief Justice's protection, and watched a crowd gather outside. They'd been there since dawn, growing larger every hour. Some held signs. Others simply stared at the building with the hungry curiosity of people witnessing a spectacular destruction. "They think I'm a traitor," she said quietly. Constance, who'd barely left her side since Edmund's arrest, came to stand beside her. "Some do. Others think you're brave. The truth is, most don't know what to think. This is unprecedented, Helena. A sister testifying against her own brother? It challenges everything society believes about family loyalty." Edmund challenged everything society believes about honor when he committed murder. Helena's voice was sharper than she intended. "Why is my betrayal of a criminal worse than his betrayal of justice?" "Because you're a woman," Constance said bluntly, "and women are supposed to be loyal above all else. Loyal to fathers, to brothers, to husbands. The social order depends on it. You've broken that order, and people are terrified of what comes next." A stone crashed through the window, missing Helena by inches. Glass shattered across the floor. From the street below came shouts, "Traitor! Whore! Ashford's Jezebel!" Constance pulled Helena away from the window as Pemberton's butler rushed in, followed by 2 constables. "Lady Helena, you must move to an interior room." "It's not safe." "Nowhere is safe," Helena interrupted. "That's the point, isn't it? Edmund was right. London is tearing us apart." "Let them tear." Damian's voice came from the doorway. He'd been at Scotland Yard all morning, giving additional testimony. His face was drawn with exhaustion, but his eyes blazed with determination. "Helena, we knew this would happen. We prepared for it." "Did we?" Helena gestured toward the broken window, toward the angry crowd outside. "I expected judgment, yes. Condemnation. But this?" Another stone hit the building, followed by more shouting. "They want blood, Damian. My blood. Your blood. They don't care about truth or justice. They care about the spectacle." Damian crossed the room and took her hands. "Then we give them a different spectacle. The trial begins in 3 days. Lord Pemberton has assured me that the evidence against Edmund is overwhelming. When the jury hears what he did, the conspiracy, the murder, the years of corruption, public opinion will shift." "Will it?" Helena pulled her hands away, frustration boiling over. "These are the same people who condemned you 5 years ago based on Edmund's lies. The same people who'll condemn me now for telling the truth. Why should I believe they'll suddenly develop principles? Because this time, we have proof." Damian's voice was firm. "Not just testimony. Documents. Ledgers. Letters in Edmund's own handwriting. The servant he bribed has agreed to testify in exchange for leniency. Lord Piton is cooperating to save himself from charges. The truth is inescapable, Helena. Even London society can't ignore facts." Pemberton entered the room, his expression grave. "I'm afraid Mr. Reavell's optimism may be premature. I've just received word that Edmund has retained Sir Lawrence Blackwell as his defense counsel." Damian's face went pale. "Blackwell? The man's never lost a case." "Precisely. He's brilliant, ruthless, and capable of turning any jury toward sympathy for his client." Pemberton moved to the damaged window, studying the crowd below. "Blackwell will argue that Edmund was defending his family's honor against a vengeful fortune hunter. He'll paint Lady Helena as a naive victim of Reavell's manipulation. He'll claim the evidence was fabricated or taken out of context, and he'll make it all sound utterly reasonable. Then we make the truth more reasonable than his lies, Helena said, surprised by the steel in her own voice. The fear and uncertainty she'd felt moments ago crystallized into something harder. Edmund thinks he can win because he's always won before, but he's never faced consequences. He's never had to answer for his actions in front of people who matter. That changes now. Constance smiled. There's the Helena I know. What do you need? Helena's mind raced, pulling together fragments of strategy. First, we need public opinion to shift before the trial even begins. Right now, society sees Edmund as the victim and me as the villain. We need to reverse that narrative. How? Damian asked. By telling our story. Not in court, where Blackwell can control the narrative, but directly to the people. Helena turned to Pemberton. The Times, the Telegraph, the Morning Post, they're all desperate for details about the scandal. What if we gave them an exclusive interview? The full story, from my perspective. Pemberton frowned. That's highly irregular. Witnesses don't typically speak to the press before trial. Nothing about this situation is typical, Helena countered. Edmund will use the press to destroy my credibility. Why shouldn't I use it to establish the truth? Because the prosecution needs to maintain the appearance of propriety, Pemberton said carefully. If you seem too eager to convict your own brother, the jury may see you as vindictive rather than principled. Then I won't seem eager. I'll seem heartbroken. Helena paced the room, ideas forming rapidly. I'll talk about how difficult this is, how much I loved Edmund, how devastating it was to discover his crimes. I'll make them understand that I'm not betraying family. I'm defending justice. There's a difference. Damian caught her arm as she passed. Helena, are you sure? Once you give that interview, there's no taking it back. Every word will be scrutinized, twisted, used against you. Everything I do is already being twisted against me, Helena said. At least this way, I control the initial narrative. She turned to Pemberton. Can you arrange it? A meeting with a journalist you trust? Someone who will print the truth rather than sensationalism? Pemberton considered for a long moment. William Stirling at the Telegraph. He's honest, measured, and influential. If he writes your story sympathetically, others will follow his lead. Then arrange it, today if possible. 3 hours later, Helena sat in Pemberton's study across from William Stirling, a middle-aged man with intelligent eyes and ink-stained fingers. Constance sat beside her for moral support, while Damian watched from the corner of the room. Stirling opened his notebook. Lady Helena, thank you for agreeing to speak with me. I know these circumstances are difficult. Difficult doesn't begin to describe it, Helena said quietly. Mr. Stirling, I want to be clear about something from the start. I love my brother. Or rather, I loved the brother I thought I knew. The man who raised me after our parents died. The man who gave me every material comfort. But that brother was a fiction. The real Edmund Stirling is a murderer who destroyed innocent lives to protect his own interests. Stirling's pen scratched across paper. Those are serious accusations. What evidence? I saw the evidence with my own eyes, Helena interrupted. Ledgers detailing payments to conspirators, letters planning the destruction of the Duke of Blackstone, notes about deliberately causing the old Duke's fatal heart attack, all in Edmund's handwriting, all undeniable. And yet you lived in his house, benefited from his wealth, participated in society on his arm. Some might say you were complicit in his crimes. Helena had expected this. Some might say that yes, and they'd be partly right. I was willfully blind for years. I saw the pieces. Edmund's obsessive need for control, his mysterious financial recovery, his cold calculation about people's lives, but I didn't put them together. I didn't want to see the truth because it was easier to live in comfortable ignorance. What changed? Damian Reavell returned to London. He showed me evidence that contradicted everything Edmund had told me about the Blackstone scandal. At first, I didn't believe him, but then I investigated on my own. I searched Edmund's private papers, and what I found, Helena's voice cracked authentically. What I found destroyed every illusion I'd ever held about my brother. Stirling leaned forward. Walk me through that night, the night of your brother's arrest. Helena recounted the events carefully, emphasizing Edmund's threats, his admission of guilt, his willingness to murder both her and Damian to protect his secrets. She spoke about the terror of facing those pistols, the relief when Pemberton intervened, the crushing weight of realizing her brother was truly a monster. "This must have been devastating for you," Stirling said with genuine sympathy. "The man who raised you, who you trusted completely, revealed as a criminal." "Devastating doesn't capture it," Helena said. "It's like discovering the ground beneath your feet was never solid. Everything I believed about family, about loyalty, about my place in the world, all of it was built on lies. Edmund didn't love me. He possessed me. There's a difference. Yet you're vilified in society while he garners sympathy. How does that make you feel?" "Angry," Helena said honestly. "Furious that a woman who tells the truth about male violence is condemned while the violent man is defended, but also determined. The crowd outside this house, the people throwing stones and calling me traitor, they'll understand eventually. When all the evidence is presented at trial, when Edmund's crimes are laid bare, they'll see that I did the right thing. I have to believe that." Stirling studied her face. "Some say this is about more than justice. They say you were seduced by the Duke of Blackstone, that you're helping him seek revenge against your brother for a romantic rival's sake." Helena felt Damian tense in the corner, but she kept her voice steady. "I won't dignify that with denial. My relationship with Damian is my own business. What matters is that the evidence against Edmund is real, documented, and damning. Whether I love Damian or hate him doesn't change the facts of what Edmund did. But it affects your credibility, does it?" Helena's voice turned sharp. "When a man exposes corruption, no one questions whether he's romantically involved with someone. His testimony stands on its own merit. Why should my credibility depend on my romantic status? Why is a woman's truth always suspect if she's not perfectly virtuous?" Stirling blinked, his pen pausing. "That's a fair point." "The fairest point in this entire scandal," Constance interjected. "Helena risked everything to expose her brother's crimes. She sacrificed her social position, her family name, her safety. And instead of being celebrated as brave, she's being punished for being female. It's grotesque." Stirling scribbled furiously. "Lady Constance, you've been a vocal supporter of Lady Helena throughout this ordeal. Why?" "Because I know her. I know her character, her principles, her courage. Helena Stirling is the most honorable person I've ever met. If she says Edmund committed these crimes, then he did. Full stop." Constance's voice was fierce. "And frankly, Mr. Stirling, society should be ashamed. We claim to value truth and justice, but the moment a woman inconveniences us with uncomfortable facts, we call her hysterical. It's cowardice dressed up as morality." The interview continued for another hour. Stirling asked about Helena's childhood with Edmund, about the financial struggles she'd been unaware of, about the moment she realized her brother was capable of murder. Helena answered each question carefully, balancing honesty with strategy. When Stirling finally closed his notebook, he looked at Helena with something like respect. "Lady Helena, I came here expecting to find either a villain or a victim. Instead, I found something more complicated, a woman who made an impossible choice and is willing to face the consequences." "That's the story all right." "Thank you," Helena said quietly. The article appeared the next morning, spread across the Telegraph's front page. Stirling had written exactly what Helena hoped for, a nuanced portrait of a woman caught between family loyalty and moral duty who chose justice despite the personal cost. He'd quoted her extensively, letting her own words make the case rather than filtering everything through his interpretation. The response was immediate and divided. Some readers praised Helena's courage. Others condemned her still. But the conversation shifted. Instead of automatic vilification, people began debating whether she'd done the right thing, whether family loyalty should shield criminals from consequences, whether women should be expected to remain silent about male violence. The other newspapers followed Stirling's lead, interviewing legal experts, society figures, and random citizens about the scandal. Opinion remained split, but the pure hostility Helena had faced began to crack. 2 days before the trial, Pemberton summoned Helena and Damian to his study. His expression was troubled. "I've received a message from Sir Lawrence Blackwell. Edmund wishes to speak with you, Helena, privately, before the trial begins." Helena's stomach clenched. Why? Blackwell claims Edmund wants to apologize, to explain himself. He says your brother is deeply remorseful and hopes for reconciliation before facing judgment. It's a trap, Damian said immediately. Edmund wants to manipulate her, convince her to soften her testimony or create doubt. I know it's a trap, Helena interrupted, but I'll go anyway. Helena, no, I need to see him. Helena turned to Damian. 5 years ago, Edmund destroyed your life and you never got closure. You never got to confront him directly about what he took from you. I won't make that mistake. Whatever Edmund wants to say, I'll hear it, but I'll hear it on my terms. Pemberton nodded slowly. I can arrange for the meeting to take place at Newgate Prison, with guards present. He won't be able to harm you physically. Physically isn't the only way Edmund harms people, Helena said. But I'll risk it. The next afternoon, Helena entered Newgate Prison's visiting room with her heart hammering against her ribs. The room was small, gray, and smelled of damp stone and despair. Edmund sat at a plain wooden table, his hands shackled, his usually immaculate appearance now disheveled. He'd lost weight in just a few days. His skin had a grayish cast, but his eyes were still sharp, still calculating. Helena, his voice cracked on her name. Thank you for coming. She sat across from him, keeping the table between them. What do you want, Edmund? To apologize. To explain. To ask for your forgiveness. He leaned forward as far as the shackles allowed. Everything I did, every choice I made was to protect you, to give you the life you deserved. I know my methods were wrong, but my intentions... Stop. Helena's voice was flat. Don't insult my intelligence with that performance. You didn't ask me here to apologize. You asked me here to manipulate me. So do it properly. Tell me what you actually want. Edmund's mask slipped, revealing cold fury beneath. I want you to recant your testimony. Tell the court you were mistaken about what you saw in my study, that Reavell pressured you, confused you, made you doubt your own memories. Why would I do that? Because I'm still your brother, because destroying me destroys our family name, because you'll never be accepted in society again if you're responsible for sending me to the gallows. Edmund's voice turned urgent. Helena, think about your future, about your children, if you ever have them. They'll carry the stain of what you've done. Is that what you want? My future children will carry the truth, Helena said, that their mother stood for justice even when it cost her everything, that she refused to protect a murderer just because he shared her blood. I can live with that legacy. You won't live at all! Edmund slammed his shackled hands on the table, making the guards shift. Do you think Reavell loves you? He's using you for revenge. Once I'm convicted, once he's gotten what he wants, he'll discard you. And you'll have nothing. No family, no reputation, no prospects. You'll be alone and ruined, and it will be your own fault. Helena felt the words hit their target. The fear she'd been suppressing bubbled up. What if Edmund was right? What if Damian's feelings were just a tool for vengeance? But then she remembered Damian's face when he'd pulled her from Edmund's line of fire, the way he'd held her afterward, shaking with relief that she was alive, the gentleness in his voice when he said he loved her. If Damian abandons me, I'll survive, Helena said quietly. I've discovered I'm stronger than I ever knew, strong enough to stand alone if necessary. But Edmund, I don't think you'll survive what's coming, not because of me, because of what you are. Edmund's expression twisted. What I am? I'm a man who did what was necessary to succeed in a brutal world. I'm no different than half the peers in Parliament. The only difference is that I got caught. No. The difference is that you murdered someone. Helena stood. Damian's father was 63 years old. He had a weak heart, yes, but he might have lived years longer if you hadn't deliberately orchestrated circumstances to kill him. You chose to end his life to protect your secrets. That's not survival, Edmund. That's evil. Survival and evil are often the same thing. Then I choose neither. Helena moved toward the door, but Edmund's voice stopped her. Helena, please, don't do this. I'm begging you. She turned back. For just a moment, she saw genuine fear in her brother's eyes. Not fear of punishment or death, but fear of being truly alone. You made your choices, Edmund. Now live with them. She walked out without looking back. The trial began on a cold, gray morning. The Old Bailey was packed beyond capacity. with people standing in the aisles and crowding the gallery. Helena sat in the witness section, flanked by Constance and Pemberton's wife. Across the courtroom, Edmund sat beside Sir Lawrence Blackwell, his expression carefully neutral. The prosecution opened with devastating precision. They presented the ledgers Helena had discovered, each payment documented and dated. They showed the letters between Edmund and Lord Peaton, proving conspiracy. They brought forward the bribed servant, who testified tearfully about being paid to plant evidence against Damian. Sir Lawrence Blackwell cross-examined brilliantly, but even he couldn't explain away the documents. The evidence was too concrete, too damning. Then came Damian's testimony. He walked to the stand with quiet dignity, his voice steady as he recounted the card game, the accusations, the scandal that had destroyed his life. He described his father's deterioration, the way the old Duke had fought futilely to clear his son's name, the heart attack that had killed him. "Did you love your father?" the prosecutor asked. "More than anything," Damian said quietly. "He was a good man, an honest man. He deserved better than to die in shame over lies." "And the defendant, Edmund Stirling, what do you believe his role was in your father's death?" "He murdered him." Damian's voice was steel. "Not with a weapon, but with calculated cruelty. He knew my father's health was fragile. He knew the scandal would destroy him, and he didn't care. My father's death was just collateral damage in Edmund's quest for power." Blackwell's cross-examination was brutal. He hammered at Damian's motives, suggesting this entire case was revenge for losing a card game. He insinuated that Damian had seduced Helena to manipulate her testimony. He painted Damian as a bitter failure looking for someone to blame. Damian weathered it all with remarkable composure, never losing his temper, never taking the bait. And when Blackwell finally sat down, defeated, the courtroom was silent. Then came Helena's turn. She approached the witness stand with her head high, ignoring the whispers that followed her. The prosecutor led her through her testimony gently, letting her describe discovering the evidence, confronting Edmund, the terror of that night in the study. "Lady Helena," the prosecutor said carefully, "this is your brother, the man who raised you. How do you feel about testifying against him?" Helena looked directly at the jury, heartbroken, angry, but certain I'm doing the right thing. My brother committed crimes, terrible crimes, and he needs to face justice, no matter how much it hurts me to say so. Blackwell's cross-examination was merciless. He questioned her relationship with Damian, her mental state, her motivations. He suggested she was a naive woman manipulated by a vengeful man. "Isn't it true, Lady Helena, that you became romantically involved with Mr. Reavell before discovering any evidence against your brother?" "My romantic life is irrelevant to this case." "It goes to credibility, Lady Helena. A woman in love might say anything to protect her lover. And a brother facing murder charges might say anything to save himself," Helena shot back. "Sir Lawrence, you're trying to make this about my virtue instead of about Edmund's crimes. But the evidence doesn't care about my romantic history. The ledgers don't lie. The letters don't lie. My brother murdered a man, and no amount of attacking my character changes that fact." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. The judge gavelled for order, but Helena saw several jury members nodding thoughtfully. Blackwell tried several more tactics, but Helena held firm. She answered every question with calm precision, never losing her composure, never wavering in her testimony. When she finally stepped down, she saw something in the jury's eyes that gave her hope. Belief. The closing arguments lasted 2 days. Blackwell gave a masterful performance, portraying Edmund as a victim of circumstance and family betrayal. But the prosecution's closing was devastating. They laid out the evidence piece by piece, building an inescapable case. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they returned, the foreman stood and read the verdict in a voice that shook slightly. "On the charge of conspiracy to defraud, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of the murder of Duke Robert Reavell, we find the defendant guilty." The courtroom exploded. Edmund's face went white as marble. Blackwell slumped in his seat. Helena felt Damian's hand find hers, squeezing tight. The judge pronounced sentence immediately. "Edmund Stirling, you are hereby sentenced to hang by the neck until dead. May mercy find you where justice could not." Guards led Edmund away. As he passed Helena's seat, he stopped and looked at her one final time. "I hope it was worth it," he said quietly. "It was," Helena replied, and meant it. Outside the courthouse, a crowd had gathered. Helena expected hostility, more stones and shouts. Instead, something unexpected happened. A woman approached, middle-aged, plainly dressed with work-worn hands. "Lady Helena, I just wanted to thank you. My husband was ruined by Edmund Stirling 3 years ago. False accusations, planted evidence, exactly like what he did to the Duke. We lost everything. I thought we'd never see justice, but you gave us that. You proved that even powerful men can fall." Others came forward. A factory worker whose brother had died in one of Edmund's facilities due to unsafe conditions. A shopkeeper Edmund had driven out of business. A young woman who'd been compromised by one of Edmund's associates and then silenced with threats. Helena had thought she was exposing one man's crimes. Instead, she'd given voice to dozens of victims. That evening, back at Pemberton's house, Helena stood at the repaired window and watched the sunset paint London gold and red. Damian came to stand beside her, his hand warm in hers. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we rebuild," Damian said. "My title is restored. My father's name is cleared. And we—" He turned to face her. "Helena, I meant what I said before. I love you, not because you helped me get justice, because of who you are. The bravest, most principled person I've ever known." "I'm not brave," Helena protested. "I was terrified the entire time." "Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing the right thing despite the fear." Damian pulled a small box from his pocket. "I know this is unconventional. We've barely known each other a month, but I also know that I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Helena Stirling, will you marry me?" Helena looked at the ring, a simple band with a single perfect sapphire, and felt tears sting her eyes. A month ago, she'd been a prisoner in her brother's house. Now she was free, vindicated, offered a future she'd never dared imagine. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." As Damian slipped the ring onto her finger, Helena heard cheering from the street below. The crowd that had thrown stones just days ago was now celebrating. The woman who'd thanked her stood at the front, holding a hastily made sign, "Justice for Lady Helena." The battle wasn't entirely over. Edmund would appeal. Society would take time to fully accept her. There would be challenges ahead. But standing there in Damian's arms, wearing his ring, knowing she'd done the right thing despite the cost, Helena felt something she'd never experienced before. Victory. Not over her brother, not over society's judgment, over herself. Over the cage she'd lived in for 23 years. She was finally, completely, triumphantly free. She was finally, completely, triumphantly free. But freedom, Helena discovered in the weeks that followed, came with a price she hadn't fully anticipated. Edmund's execution was scheduled for 3 weeks after the verdict, and despite everything he'd done, despite the lives he'd destroyed, Helena found herself unable to sleep through the nights leading up to it. "You don't have to attend," Damian said one evening as they sat in the drawing room of the modest townhouse he'd purchased with what remained of his restored assets. "No one expects you to witness your own brother's death." "Everyone expects exactly that," Helena corrected, staring at the fire. "Half of London thinks I should be there to prove my conviction. The other half thinks I should be there to show remorse. Either way, they're watching to see what I do." Constance, who'd become a near-permanent fixture in their lives, looked up from her needlework. "Then do what you want, not what they expect. You've spent your whole life performing for an audience, Helena. When does that end?" The question haunted Helena through the long nights. When did it end? When could she stop justifying her choices to a society that would judge her no matter what she did? The answer came unexpectedly, in the form of a letter delivered 3 days before Edmund's scheduled execution. Helena recognized the handwriting immediately, Edmund's precise, slanting script, and her hands trembled as she broke the seal. "Helena, I write this knowing you may not read it, knowing you have every right to burn it unopened, but I find myself compelled to set down thoughts I cannot take to my grave without expressing. You were right, about everything. I spent my life believing that power was the only currency that mattered, that survival justified any action, that love was weakness to be exploited. I built an empire on those principles, and I told myself I was strong. Instead, I was terrified Terrified of being poor again. Terrified of being powerless. Terrified that without control, I would disappear entirely. So I controlled you. I controlled everyone around me. And I called it protection, called it love, called it anything except what it was, fear dressed up as strength. You asked me once if I ever thought about the people I destroyed. The truth is, I didn't let myself think about them. Damian's father was just an obstacle. The servants I bribed were just tools. Even you, Helena, were just a piece on my chessboard. Valuable, yes, but ultimately expendable if protecting you threatened my position. I see now how monstrous that is, how thoroughly I corrupted everything I touched. I don't ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I need you to know that in destroying me, you saved me from becoming something even worse. You gave me these final weeks to see myself clearly, perhaps for the first time in my life. I'm genuinely sorry for what I did to you, for the cage I built, for the years I stole, for making you believe that my control was love. You deserve to be free. You always did. Your brother, Edmund Helena, read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. It changed nothing about Edmund's crimes, nothing about the justice of his sentence, but it gave her something she hadn't realized she needed: closure. She showed the letter to Damian that evening. He read it in silence, his jaw tight. "Do you think he means it?" Helena asked. "Or is this just one final manipulation? Does it matter?" Damian handed the letter back carefully. Even if Edmund is sincere, even if he truly understands what he did, it doesn't erase the harm. My father is still dead. 5 years of my life are still gone. The people he destroyed can't be unmade whole by a letter of apology. I know, but it matters to me. Helena folded the letter carefully. I needed to know that somewhere beneath the monster, my brother was still human enough to feel regret. Are you going to the execution? Helena took a deep breath. Yes, not because society expects it, not to prove anything, but because Edmund is still my brother, and he's going to die alone and afraid. I won't let his last sight of this world be of strangers who hate him. Damian pulled her close. Then I'm coming with you. The day of the execution dawned cold and gray. Helena dressed in black, not the elaborate mourning costume society dictated, but a simple dress that felt honest. She and Damian traveled to Newgate Prison in silence, holding hands in the carriage while London rushed past the windows. A crowd had gathered outside the prison, as crowds always did for executions. They parted when Helena's carriage arrived, whispers following her like smoke. Some faces showed sympathy. Others showed contempt. Most showed the ghoulish curiosity of people eager to witness a scandal's final act. Inside, a guard led them to a private room overlooking the courtyard where the gallows stood. You have 15 minutes before the execution, he said quietly. If you wish to speak with the prisoner, I can arrange it. Helena nodded. Please. They brought Edmund up in chains. He looked smaller than Helena remembered, diminished by fear and the reality of his impending death. When he saw her, something crumpled in his face. You came. I came. Helena stood, separated from him by an iron grate. I read your letter. Did you believe it? I don't know, Helena said honestly. Part of me wants to. Part of me thinks it's just another performance. But Edmund, it doesn't matter anymore. What matters is that this ends today. All of it. The lies, the control, the fear. Edmund's eyes filled with tears. I'm afraid, Helena. I'm so afraid of dying. I know. Helena pressed her hand against the grate, as close to touching him as she could get. I can't make that fear go away. But I can tell you this. I forgive you. Edmund stared at her. How? After everything Not because you deserve it, Helena interrupted. Because I deserve to be free of the anger, free of the hate, free of you, Edmund, in every way. Forgiveness is the last cage door I need to open. I don't understand. I know, but maybe someday, wherever you're going, you will. Helena pulled her hand back. Goodbye, Edmund. She turned to leave, but Edmund's voice stopped her one final time. Helena, for what it's worth, I am proud of you. Of the woman you became despite me, perhaps even because of me. You're stronger than I ever was. Helena looked back at her brother, truly looked at him, not at the monster or the myth, but at the broken man about to die for his crimes. Goodbye, Edmund, she said again, and this time she meant it as both farewell and release. She and Damian returned to the observation room. Below, the executioner was preparing the gallows. A priest stood beside Edmund, murmuring prayers that Helena couldn't hear. The crowd outside roared like an ocean. When the moment came, Helena forced herself to watch, not out of vindictiveness, but as witness. Edmund had destroyed so many lives in secret. His death, at least, would be witnessed, acknowledged, real. The trapdoor opened. Edmund fell, and it was over. Helena felt Damian's arm around her shoulders, steadying her as her legs threatened to give way. "It's done," he murmured. "It's finally done." But even as Edmund's body was cut down and carried away, Helena knew the hardest part was still ahead. Edmund's death might satisfy justice, but it didn't solve the practical problem of her ruined reputation or Damian's uncertain future. They had truth and love, yes, but neither paid bills or restored social standing. The answer came from an unexpected source. 2 weeks after the execution, Lord Pemberton summoned them to his office. His expression was unusually cheerful. "I have news," he said without preamble. "The Queen has reviewed your case personally. She's quite impressed with your courage, Lady Helena, and deeply apologetic about the injustice done to you, Your Grace." Damian's eyes widened. "The Queen knows about us?" "Half of England knows about you. The question was whether Her Majesty would condemn or commend. I'm pleased to report she's chosen the latter." Pemberton slid 2 official-looking documents across his desk. "Your Grace, your honors and titles are fully restored with the Queen's personal apology for the wrongful conviction. Additionally, the Crown is compensating you for the 5 years of exile. It's not nearly enough to restore your family's former wealth, but it's a start." Damian picked up the document with shaking hands. I don't know what to say." "Say thank you and accept it graciously," Pemberton advised. "As for you, Lady Helena, the Queen wishes to meet you personally. She's quite interested in your perspective on women's legal rights and social reform. Apparently, your testimony has sparked considerable debate about whether women should have more autonomy in matters of family and justice." Helena felt dizzy. "The Queen wants to meet me?" "Next Tuesday at Buckingham Palace. I suggest you prepare. Her Majesty can be, formidable." Pemberton smiled. "Though I suspect you'll manage just fine." The meeting with Queen Victoria was indeed formidable. The monarch was 70 years old, dressed in perpetual mourning for her long-dead husband, with eyes that missed absolutely nothing. "Lady Helena Stirling," the Queen said, studying her with intense scrutiny, "you have caused quite a stir in our kingdom." Helena curtsied deeply. "Your Majesty, I never intended—" "We know what you intended. Justice, truth, freedom from male tyranny disguised as protection." The Queen gestured for Helena to rise. "We find ourselves in agreement with your principles, if not your methods. Testifying against one's own brother is dramatic. It was necessary, Your Majesty." "Was it? Or was it revenge?" Helena met the Queen's gaze steadily. "It was both, Your Majesty, and I won't apologize for that. My brother murdered a man. He destroyed innocent lives. He controlled me through fear and manipulation for my entire life. Exposing him was justice. Breaking free of him was revenge. I see no contradiction in those truths." The Queen's expression shifted into something that might have been approval. "Honesty. How refreshing." She gestured to a chair. "Sit. Tell us about your interest in social reform. We understand you have radical ideas about women's education and medical training." The conversation that followed lasted 2 hours. Helena discussed her vision for women's hospitals staffed by female physicians, for educational opportunities beyond the domestic arts, for legal reforms that would give women more control over their own lives and finances. The Queen listened intently, occasionally challenging Helena's points, but more often nodding thoughtfully. When Helena finally finished, the monarch was silent for a long moment. "You are aware," the Queen said carefully, "that implementing even a fraction of these reforms would require overturning centuries of tradition, that most of our male subjects would resist violently, that you would face opposition from women as well as men." "Yes, Your Majesty, I'm aware." "And yet you persist in believing it possible?" "I persist in believing it necessary," Helena corrected. Possibility is something we create, not something we wait for. The Queen smiled, a rare, genuine expression. We like you, Lady Helena. We are appointing you to our newly formed Commission on Women's Social Welfare. You will work with other reformers to study and recommend changes to laws affecting women's education, employment, and legal rights. The position comes with a modest salary and considerable controversy. Do you accept? Helena's heart soared. Yes, Your Majesty. I accept with gratitude. Don't thank us yet. You'll be fighting uphill battles for years, but we believe you're suited to it. The Queen's expression turned serious. One more thing. We understand you're engaged to the Duke of Blackstone. He has our blessing, should you desire it. The man has been through enough without society making difficulties about his choice of bride. Thank you, Your Majesty. That means more than you know. Helena left Buckingham Palace in a daze. She'd entered expecting judgment and left with validation, purpose, and the Queen's explicit support. The woman who'd been vilified as a traitor just weeks ago was now a royal appointee working on social reform. The wedding took place in spring, 6 months after Edmund's execution. It was a small, private ceremony, nothing like the grand society event such a union might have commanded under different circumstances. But Helena preferred it that way. Just close friends, Lord Pemberton and his family, Constance, and a handful of people who'd supported them through the scandal. As Helena walked down the aisle toward Damian, she thought about the girl she'd been a year ago. Trapped, controlled, believing the cage was safety. That girl would never have recognized this woman, confident, purposeful, free. Damian's eyes filled with tears when he saw her. "You're beautiful," he whispered as she reached his side. "I'm free," Helena corrected. "That's better than beautiful." The ceremony was simple but profound. When the minister pronounced them married, when Damian kissed her with fierce joy, Helena felt something shift in the universe. This wasn't just a wedding. It was a declaration of independence, a claim to a future she'd written herself. The reception afterward was lively despite its small size. Constance gave a toast that made everyone laugh and cry simultaneously. Pemberton spoke about justice and courage and the importance of standing for truth even when it cost everything. And Damian, in his toast, spoke directly to Helena. "A year ago, I was a broken man consumed by revenge. I wanted Edmund Stirling to suffer, wanted the world to see him as the monster he was. But revenge alone would have been hollow. It was Helena who taught me that justice is about more than punishment. It's about creating a world where such abuses can't happen again, where women aren't controlled and silenced, where truth matters more than power." He raised his glass to her. "To my wife, who is braver than any soldier, stronger than any fortress, and kinder than I could ever deserve. Helena, you didn't just help me get justice. You helped me become a better man. I love you beyond words." Helena wiped her eyes, stood, and raised her own glass. To second chances, to truth, to freedom, and to building something better than what came before. That night, alone in their modest townhouse, Helena and Damian stood at the window overlooking London. The city sparkled with gaslight, teeming with life and possibility. "What happens now?" Damian asked, echoing Helena's question from months before. "Now we build," Helena said. "The commission starts next month. I've been corresponding with several physicians about the women's hospital, and there's a property in Bloomsbury that would be perfect for a women's educational institute." "Helena," Damian interrupted gently, "I meant what happens with us." She turned to face him, this man who'd seen her at her worst and loved her anyway. "With us, we live, we love, we fight for what we believe in. We fail sometimes and succeed sometimes and keep going regardless." "That sounds exhausting. It sounds alive." Helena pulled him closer. "I spent 23 years being protected from life, being sheltered and controlled and kept in comfortable ignorance. I'm done with comfort, Damian. I want to matter. I want to make a difference. I want to use the freedom I fought for to help other women find theirs." Damian kissed her forehead. "Then that's what we'll do. Together." The months that followed were indeed exhausting. The Commission on Women's Social Welfare met weekly, debating everything from factory conditions to educational access to legal reforms. Helena quickly became one of its most vocal members, pushing for changes that made even the other reformers nervous. She also began writing articles for progressive newspapers about women's rights, essays about the legal system's treatment of female testimony. Eventually, a book, The Gilded Cage, A Woman's Account of Justice and Freedom. It became a sensation, selling out its first printing in days and sparking furious debate across England. Critics called her unfeminine, radical, dangerous. Supporters called her courageous, visionary, necessary. Helena didn't care much about either label. She cared about the letters she received from women all over the country, thanking her for speaking truths they'd been silenced from expressing. The women's hospital opened a year after her wedding. It was small, just 10 beds and 3 female physicians. But it represented something revolutionary. Women treating women, making their own medical decisions without male oversight. Helena was there for the opening ceremony, now visibly pregnant with her first child. The newspapers had made much of this, the reformed radicals settling into respectable motherhood. But Helena knew better. Motherhood wouldn't slow her down. If anything, it would intensify her commitment to building a better world for her daughter to inherit. Yes, daughter. Helena was somehow certain the baby would be a girl who would never know the cage Helena had escaped. The birth came in late autumn, during a thunderstorm reminiscent of the one that had raged the night Damian returned to London. Helena labored for 14 hours in the women's hospital she'd founded, attended by female physicians who treated her as a person rather than a delicate vessel. When they finally placed the baby in her arms, a squalling, red-faced girl with Damian's dark eyes, Helena wept with joy and relief and overwhelming love. "What should we name her?" Damian asked, looking at his daughter with wonder. Helena thought of Edmund's letter, of his final acknowledgement that she'd been right to be free. She thought of the old duke, murdered by conspiracy, whose death had started this entire journey. She thought of all the women who'd written to her, thanking her for speaking when they could not. "Victoria," she said, "after the queen who supported us. But we'll call her Tori. Something just hers." "Victoria Reavell," Damian tested the name. "I like it. Strong, independent." "Like her mother," the attending physician said with a smile. As Helena held her daughter, she looked out the hospital window at London below. Somewhere in this city, women were still trapped in cages of control and propriety. Somewhere, men like Edmund still wielded power through fear and manipulation. Somewhere, injustice still thrived in darkness. But also somewhere, a woman was reading Helena's book and finding courage to speak her truth. A girl was dreaming of becoming a physician. A wife was questioning whether her husband's control was really love. The world was changing, slowly, painfully, with resistance at every turn. But it was changing, and Helena had helped change it. 5 years later, Helena stood before a crowd of 300 women at the opening of the Reavell Institute for Women's Education. The building rose 4 stories high, with classrooms for mathematics, sciences, literature, and law. The first cohort of students, 50 young women from across England, sat in the front rows, their faces bright with possibility. Damian stood beside her on the platform, their daughter Tori balanced on his hip. At 5 years old, Tori already showed signs of her mother's fierce independence, frequently announcing that she was going to be a doctor and a lawyer and a sea captain when she grew up. "Ladies," Helena began, her voice carrying across the crowd, "thank you for being here today. This institute represents something we were told was impossible. Women receiving the same education as men. Women being prepared not just for marriage and motherhood, but for careers, for leadership, for lives of our own choosing." She paused, looking at the young faces before her. "Many of you know my story. How I testified against my own brother to expose his crimes. How I was vilified for choosing justice over family loyalty. How I was called traitor, whore, radical, and worse. I won't lie to you. The path you're choosing by coming here, by pursuing education and independence, will not be easy. You will face opposition. You will be mocked, dismissed, told you're unnatural or unwomanly. You will have doors slammed in your faces that open easily for your brothers. But you will also have something precious, something worth every hardship." Helena's voice strengthened. "You will have freedom, the freedom to choose your own path, the freedom to define success on your own terms, the freedom to look at the cages society builds and say, 'No, not for me.' This institute exists because women before you fought for change. because they refused to accept the world as it was and insisted on building the world as it should be. Your education here is not just about learning facts or skills. It's about learning to question, to challenge, to create. Helena gestured to the building behind her. These walls represent possibility. Every woman who studies here, who graduates and goes on to make her mark on the world, proves that we were right, that women are not delicate flowers who need protection. We are human beings who deserve freedom, education, and the chance to reach our full potential. So study hard, ask difficult questions, challenge your professors and each other. Fail sometimes because failure means you dared to try. And remember always that you stand on the shoulders of women who fought for your right to be here. The applause was thunderous. Helena saw tears on many faces, students, supporters, even a few skeptical guests who'd come expecting to mock and found themselves moved instead. After the ceremony, as guests mingled and explored the institute, Constance appeared at Helena's elbow with champagne and a knowing smile. "Look at you," she said. "From trapped sister to royal appointee to founder of an institute. Not bad for someone who was throwing stones at windows a few years ago." "I never threw stones at windows," Helena protested. "No, but they threw stones at you. Same principle." Constance clinked her glass against Helena's. "To freedom, and to proving that one woman with courage can change the world." "Not one woman," Helena corrected. "Many women. That's the point. I'm not special, Constance. I'm just someone who refused to accept the cage. That makes you special in a world that builds cages for every woman it can." As the sun set over London, Helena stood with her family, Damian, Tori, and the small circle of friends and allies who'd supported her journey, and reflected on how far she'd come. From the melancholic girl watching the storm, to the woman who'd brought her brother to justice, to the reformer building institutions that would outlast her. Edmund had been right about one thing. She had destroyed their family. The Ashford name was tainted, the estate sold to pay restitution to Edmund's victims. But from those ashes, Helena had built something better. A new family, a new purpose, a new world, one woman at a time. That night, after Tori was asleep and the house was quiet, Helena sat at her desk and began writing. Not an article or an essay, but a letter. A letter to her daughter, to be opened on her 21st birthday. "My dearest Tori, by the time you read this, you'll be a woman grown. I hope the world you inhabit is kinder to women than the one I knew. I hope you've never felt trapped or controlled or silenced. But if you have, I want you to know something. You have the power to break free. Not easily, not without cost. Freedom is never free. It's purchased with courage, persistence, and sometimes sacrifice. But it is always, always worth the price. I was 23 years old before I understood that I had a choice, that I didn't have to accept the cage my brother built, or the limitations society imposed, or the small, controlled life others designed for me. The day I chose freedom, the day I decided truth mattered more than comfort, was the day my real life began. You are growing up in a different world than I did, thanks to the women who fought for change. But there will still be people who try to control you, who tell you that certain ambitions are unfeminine or impossible. There will still be cages, even if they're prettier and more subtle than the ones I knew. When you encounter them, remember this. You are not delicate. You are not decoration. You are a human being with the same capacity for courage, intelligence, and greatness as any man. The only limits on your life are the ones you accept. Your father and I love you beyond measure. We will support whatever path you choose, physician, lawyer, sea captain, or something we haven't yet imagined. We will celebrate your successes and comfort your failures. But most importantly, we will remind you always that you are free. Free to choose, free to fail, free to succeed, free to define your own life on your own terms. That is our gift to you. The gift of freedom that I had to fight for, that you receive as your birthright. Use it well. Use it boldly. Use it to build a world even better than the one your father and I created. I love you, my fierce girl. Never doubt that. Never doubt yourself. Your mother, Helena. She sealed the letter and locked it away. A message across time to the daughter who would someday be a woman making her own impossible choices. Outside, London slept, full of cages and the women trapped within them. but also full of women reading by candlelight, dreaming impossible dreams, planning impossible rebellions. The world was changing, one broken cage at a time. Helena had started as a melancholic girl watching storms from gilded windows. She'd become a woman who'd weathered those storms, who'd walked through fire and emerged transformed. She'd traded her brother's protection for her own power. She'd traded comfortable ignorance for uncomfortable truth. She'd traded the safety of the cage for the danger of freedom. And she'd won. Not because the fight was over, it would never be over, not in her lifetime, but because she'd proven that the fight was possible, that even the strongest cages could be broken, that even the most powerful men could fall, that even the most trapped woman could become free. As she climbed into bed beside Damian, who pulled her close with sleepy affection, Helena felt a profound sense of peace. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The commission had difficult debates ahead. The institute needed funding. There were letters to write, speeches to give, battles to fight. But tonight, she was simply Helena, wife, mother, reformer, survivor, free. And that freedom, hard-won, blood-bought, precious beyond measure, was the greatest victory of all. The storm that had raged the night Damian returned to London was long past. In its place was something better, the steady, determined light of dawn. A new day, a new world, a world where women could choose their own destinies. And Helena Stirling Reavell, once trapped in a gilded cage, had helped build it.